Representative Mannion, come on down. This is Senate Judiciary. We're going to start with House Bill 240FN relative to non-payment of dog licensing fees. Representative Mannion, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Tom Mannion representing Hillsborough 1, Pelham. So this bill started its life as something else. It got changed in the House. So the story behind this is a constituent of mine who's now on the select board, probably because of this whole situation, had an elderly dog that got vaccinated 2 years ago for rabies, and then it became partially paralyzed for a short period of time as an adverse reaction. The following year, when the time came to register, it slipped her mind. She wanted to work with her vet to get an exemption for her dog for the entire process, for the vaccine. The dog's elderly. It doesn't even leave the house. She doesn't have any problem with that. The problem is, like, months later, trying to go through this process, she gets a warning from the town with this big threatening letter saying that they're going to send law enforcement to her house to seize this elderly dog because she refused to pay $20. The issue that she had wasn't with the vaccine requirements. It wasn't with paying a fine or any of that. The issue that she had, and I thought was egregious, is that we're going to send law enforcement to somebody's house, potentially to kick down the door, I don't know, to seize someone's family member over failure to pay $20. So when I first wrote this bill, it was probably overzealous. I think I stripped out too much of the RSA. All I wanted to do was to remove the ability for them to come and seize the animal. You want to issue fines, issue fines. You want to discharge it to the district court for handling that was not touched or wasn't supposed to be touched, but OLS being the way it is, and I didn't do my due diligence when reviewing it, and the deadline being what it was. The bill went to E&A, Environment and Agriculture, on the other side of the wall, in a form I didn't quite want. So they amended it instead to change a shall to a may, a single word change, and it kind of wasn't what I was going for. It wasn't that I wanted the fine to be optional. It's just that I didn't want them to send law enforcement to your house to kidnap your family member over failure to pay $20. That's pretty much it. I'm open to any questions.
Senator? No, you're all set, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day. O'Brien from Animal Control. Bajarna? Yarna, okay.
Can you hear me now? Okay, so I found out probably 10 minutes before this meeting started that 240 was going to be seen as well as 616, which is what myself as well as a few other ACOs are here to discuss. However, I did want to bring up a few points. I don't have anything written down to hand out to you, but I did write down a few notes in the meantime.
Great.
So in regard to taking away civil forfeitures for lack of licensing your dog, licensing is crucial for public safety. It ensures that dogs are vaccinated against rabies and helps track ownership in bite incidents or aggressive dog cases. For example, we had a child bitten in Salem not too long ago. I was able to look up the dog's license, immediately let the pediatrician know that that dog was fully rabies vaccinated. And because of that, the family was able to skip the prophylaxis vaccination series, which is very painful for the child. So not only is it necessary for public safety, but it is also helpful in terms of keeping track of the animals in our town. It's a very basic measure. It's not only a necessary enforcement tool, but without civil remedies, there's little to no incentive for owners to comply voluntarily, especially repeat offenders. It weakens accountability. Licensing ensures dogs are properly cared for and that owners are taking basic legal responsibilities seriously. So it lets us know not only how many dogs are in our community, but where they're located, where they belong should they get lost. And then, of course, we're able to follow up and start noticing things like, well, you haven't licensed your dog in 3 years. I also notice you haven't taken them to the veterinarian in 3 years. They're not getting enough food and water, so on and so forth. It's the first step in checking in on that animal and making sure that welfare concerns are met. I can say that I have yet to meet a single ACO who has knocked down anyone's door in regard to seizing an animal because the dog wasn't licensed. First and foremost, if an animal is seized, it's not kept forever. It immediately needs to be seen within district court within 14 days of that animal seizure, which is already state law. So even if for some reason, heaven forbid, someone's family member was taken and it was not a reasonable seizure, that animal would most likely be returned by the judge promptly. On top of that, it is not necessarily used in that way. I have taken a dog that was unlicensed one time, and it was simply because that dog was in an incredibly unsafe situation, and that was the reason I could take the dog at that moment. The dog was then cared for, and a solution was found that very day. But it was never a situation where I would have the right to enter someone's home without a warrant and seize their animal without having a lot more information to it. So I don't know exactly what was on that letter in Pelham. I'm sorry to hear that situation happened, but it definitely doesn't occur in the way that it's been made to sound like it would. Any
Thank
questions?
you very much for your testimony.
Okay.
Dan Healy. Mr. Healy, how you doing?
Good. How are you? For the record, Dan Healy, Nashua City Clerk. So I'm here to oppose HB 240. As the representative of the sponsor indicated, that this bill changed from what it originally was. I believe the intent was to not seize the dog. And now I believe the only change to current law is making it a may instead of a shall for the warrant. My concern with that is that if we're doing things different across the state, someone moves, say, from Hudson to Nashua, and Hudson's not requiring the warrant, they're not doing that, and then we do in Nashua, it's gonna be very confusing for dog owners. I personally don't want discretion on if it's a may or a shall. I think it should remain a shall. In my time as town clerk, I was town clerk in Derry for 6 years, and the last 3 years I've been in Nashua. So in total 9 years, we didn't seize a single dog in Derry. We didn't seize a single dog in Nashua. Animal control officers aren't going to houses and kicking down the doors and taking the pet. I don't know of any instances, speaking with other clerks, that dogs have ever been seized, or if they have seized and not returned to the owner. We start our dog licensing process in January 2nd. We send out reminders, we send out 3 emails, 2 phone calls, a mailer. The residents have until April 30th to license their dogs, so they have that, 4 full months to license. May is a grace period. Fines don't start until June 1st, and then the warrant currently is brought to the governing body to be, applied after June 20th. So it gives the resident a really long time to license their dog. So if they make that warrant, they've been notified, probably 6 times already to license their dog, and it's an annual thing. Once you get a dog, most people know that they have to come in and license each year. So I don't really see the need to change it from a shall to a may. I think it's gonna really interfere with our enforcement in keeping all the dogs in our community licensed. And as one of the previous speakers, the animal control officer, had noted, that part of the licensing process is to be able to make sure that these dogs are up to date with their rabies vaccinations. So then it's gonna turn into a public health issue if dogs aren't having rabies, and there's no real penalty if someone decides that they're just not gonna license their dog. So that's all I have, and I'd be open to any questions.
Just a quick question. So at what point would you come out? I missed my grace period and it's been 4 months. Is it gonna take years before you come out to look for my dog and knock on the door?
It varies. In Nashua, we have over 10,000 dogs. We have 1 animal control officer, and, that animal control officer, he goes on vacation, we don't continuously, we really don't have, we probably could use another animal control officer, basically, in our community, so it takes some time. What I've been trying to do work with him on is, someone that hasn't licensed in 4 or 5 years, can you go to their house? Like, you kind of make those ones more of a priority, and then if he's, on a certain street, he might stop at, a couple other houses, just being in the area, but it's not an easy thing to enforce. We have a lot of residents that are a couple of years behind, and we send letters, we send the animal control officer, and they just don't license. What ends up happening with those, especially the more delinquent ones, you're talking a couple of years, is slowly they eventually end up in court, which is not something that we really want to do. Recently, we had taken someone to court. They didn't show up for the hearing. The judge asked me what I wanted to do. And I said, I'm okay with setting another date. We just want them to license a dog. We're not really looking to severely penalize people, but they should be licensing their dogs and, being compliant and, keeping up to date with the rabies and all that. But we're not really looking to bring people to court. We're not looking to do all those steps. But when it gets to a certain point, we have people that say, that's a dumb law. I'm not going to license it. I'm not going to license my dog. Take me to court. So I think there needs to be some type of penalty. I think the $25 is reasonable. The initial license, $6.50 to like $10, depending on, or even $3 for a senior dog is not that much money if someone just comes in and pays the initial fee.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Senator? No, we're all good. Thank you. Have a
Thank
great day. Does anyone else wish to testify in 240 who didn't sign up? Seeing none? That'll end the hearing. Representative Turcott. Good to see you, my friend. You're not flying. You're grounded for a week or two.
I am not flying. I will be going to training at the end of the week like I have for the last 40 years, though.
Okay. Godspeed then.
You all set?
I'm all set. Go ahead,
Thank you,
sir.
Mr.
Let me start. I'm sorry. I apologize. Start the hearing on HB 670. The Honorable Len Turcott is before us to talk to us about adjusting the minimum fine for attacks and nuisances by dogs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, other Senate members. Representative Len Turcott, I represented the towns of Barrington and Stratford in Stratford County. This bill comes to you as a result of a conversation I had with an individual who will testify here shortly, and whose daughter was very viciously attacked and spent months in rehab, and the financial costs associated with it have just been ridiculous, actually. And if you'll note some of the co-sponsors on here, when I looked for co-sponsors, each one of those had a one of their constituents also involved in a similar situation. The bill itself, you can tell by looking at some of the fines that were associated with it, were very low and out of date. I doubt they'd been changed in probably decades. So the goal was to do two things. One was to up those fines to act as a deterrent, and also update them. Originally, when I sent it to OLS, the amounts that I sent in, they got back to me and said, well, if you do that, it's actually a felony. So I had them set it at the maximum for a misdemeanor. The other thing that we added in there was that the cost associated with any of the medical bills would be automatically applied to the owner of the dog. It came out of the House with a slight amendment. The only thing they changed was the very first, if you go look on line 15, they changed it. Actually, that's not correct. That's because I'm looking at the introduced bill. The first part of it, section 2A, you probably, hopefully you have the amended version in front of you. I left my briefcase at home.
You.
Where it says they actually reduced it from 25 down to a warning for the first time. That was the only change that came out of the House. Everything else remained the same. So other than that, if you have any questions, certainly be happy to answer any of them.
What do you got? You're good. We are good, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Turcott. Representative Barry. Ian? Oh, I thought you were representative. I'm sorry. I gave you a promotion. It's called the field
I
promotion.
appreciate it.
You're welcome. Doesn't pay that well, though, so.
Thank you for having me today. My name is Ann Berry, and I am from the Rochester, City of Rochester in the Stratford County, here in support of 670. So as Rep. Turcott shared, we were out for a family walk on Christmas morning in December of 2023. And my family, including my daughter, had leashed dogs walking in our own neighborhood, and out of nowhere, a leashed or unleashed pit bull viciously attacked both my daughter and her dog. And so far, we're still working out some things in civil court, but so far, between my daughter's injuries and her dog, it's about $30,000. So I am definitely in support of this bill. People need to be responsible and face financial impact at the very least, and responsibility for a very vicious dog in which we encountered on Christmas Day in 2023.
Do you do collecting on your 30,000? Is that looking good?
No,
Do you have a suit?
yes,
Okay. So now this will make it automatic payment,
correct,
so that'll save. Okay.
correct.
Very good.
Yes,
Okay.
the owner of the dog is not paying, though we received a judgment to have the maximum, which we went
Sure.
through district court, so it's only 10,000. But it's something, so we're currently going through that, and the judgment was awarded to
And this was
my
your
adult
daughter?
Yeah, adult daughter.
How's she doing?
She's doing okay.
Okay.
Her dog has recovered, but it took about 4 months, and probably 20,000 of that 30,000 was her, and that's not including lost time. She's a physician's assistant.
Sure.
Her hand was attacked, and she was thrown to the ground. It was a very scary incident on Christmas morning for our family to endure.
Okay. Our sympathies. Sorry. Glad she's doing better though. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're
Any
all
other
set.
questions?
No, I guess not. Thank you though.
Okay.
Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
Marissa Chase.
Hi,
Afternoon.
Senators. For the record, my name is Marissa Chase. I represent the New Hampshire Association for Justice, civil plaintiffs lawyers, and we don't advocate or take a position on the underlying bill or on any criminal matter. What we would request is a slight amendment. On page 2, after line 2, add in a new subsection 4. And I'm happy to send an email to the committee with the suggested language. Our concern is that we don't want to inadvertently, I'm sorry, I'm just pulling up the language. It would be, nothing in this section is intended to limit any civil recovery that an individual may claim under RSA 466:19 or as otherwise allowed by law. We're just concerned, a few of our members were concerned that in a civil case involving a dog bite claim, that this language specifically at the end of C and D may unintentionally prevent recovery based on another RSA that is typically cited in civil dog bite claims. So that's all.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Thank you. You'll send us that language that you just
Yes,
said.
Madam
right?
Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Chase, we're all set. Great. Have a great day. Does anyone else wish to testify on 670? Nope. Seeing none, thank you. The hearing is adjourned. I have a question. You probably use your language and do that next time. Yeah, I talked to her before. Is this, okay now?
I don't think we can make
No, I was just gonna RTO the bill. Okay, we can just do that? Sure. Okay. I was just going to, he said, he's not here. So. Okay. Just gonna get rid of one? Okay. Yep. We're gonna motion to go into executive session. All in favor of going to executive session, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I move 240 FN is ITL. Okay, discussion? Nope, we're good. All in favor? Aye. Can I, with 3, do consent? Okay, motion for consent. Second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. I'll take it up. Motion to move out of executive session. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, we are out. Okay, I'm opening House Bill 616. Representative Aaron, if you're in the house. Good afternoon, ma'am. Be careful there. You don't want to lose all those papers. Since you're prime, you can do whatever you want. You can read things. I'll let you do whatever you want. I'm going to be tough on everyone else. Everyone else will be 2 minutes. No reading.
Thank you.
So you're easy.
Okay. Good afternoon, members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. For the record, my name is Judy Aaron, Representative Judy Aaron. I chair the Environment and Agriculture Committee in the House, and I represent the towns of Ackworth, Goshen, Langdon, Leominster, and Washington in District 4 in Sullivan County. I'm introducing this bill, HB 616, relative to the confiscation of animals from persons suspected or charged with abuse of animals. This bill came about after a horrible animal seizure incident happened last April in Lee, New Hampshire. The details of this event will be explained in subsequent testimony, but I'd like to take this time to go through the parts of the bill which seek to solve problems which occurred with this and other animal cruelty reports and seizure situations. While we all recognize that animal well-being is very important, we also need to make sure that when it comes to animal property seizure, that due process is followed, and that animals and their owners are treated properly and fairly. The language changes to RSA 644:8 were developed with New Hampshire Farm Bureau, the New Hampshire Department of Agriculture, UNH Extension, livestock owners, and other concerned parties after this event took place in Lee, New Hampshire. They felt that further language additions to existing statutes were needed to clarify procedures surrounding animal cruelty reporting and seizure, to ensure due process is followed, and to indicate who should or should not be involved in the process. So we'll go through the bill. First off, on page 1, lines 3 to 6. We want to make sure that an investigating officer is advised by someone from the state veterinarian's office or a designated and qualified veterinarian that their office recommends. We've already seen with another bill, which was heard in our committee, that law enforcement needs advice in these situations, and we'd like to make sure that the right people are giving them that advice. We also want to make certain that no animals may be confiscated without a person being legally charged with the crime of abuse, neglect, or cruelty, or if the animal's life is in danger. In this case in Lee, there were no charges made, no convictions made, and no due process regarding seizure of animals, and yet a person's animals were taken away, some were euthanized, and some were adopted out by the organization who took the animals, and no one knows what happened to the remaining ones. This happened mostly because the owner was made to sign a document under duress and without a clear understanding about what was being signed. In any event, the law should be quite clear about when animals can be taken away and by whom. The owner of the animal should also know exactly what they are signing on, or if they are being charged with a crime. In lines 10 and 11, or 9 and 11, 9 to 10, we would like the person who is charged with animal cruelty to be made aware that they have the right to petition the court to have their animals examined by a veterinarian of their own choice at their own expense. Most people are not aware of this right. Just looking at the here in lines 12 to 13, we are adding language to ensure that people understand whatever documents are presented to them to sign, that they have to understand the documents that they are presented to sign. In the Lee case, the owner was presented with documents to sign, and she was under duress, was very upset, and was unaware and unclear about what those documents were that she was asked to sign. In lines 27, all right, I don't know if I have the right version here, but we're adding new language that states that prior to any conviction of abuse or neglect, no confiscated animal can be altered without the authorization of the owner. Animals being kept by a custodian cannot be altered. Examples are being spayed, neutered, dehorned, or even euthanized. While the animals are still property of the owner, even though they may be removed from the premises, they should not be altered without the owner's knowledge or consent. We also added language to say that if an animal is in a state of extreme suffering, that it may be euthanized with authorization from the treating veterinarian, even without the owner's consent. We also have a section where specifically making it clear that prior to a conviction of abuse or neglect, no animal should be used to solicit donations or be used to fundraise by any individual or organization with which the animal has been placed into custody care. These unfortunate seizure incidents should not be used for purposeful gain, especially if a case has not been yet brought to a court of law and adjudicated. This enforces the basis of our legal system that a person is innocent until proven guilty, and prevents a person's reputation from being tarnished if they have not been charged and convicted of a crime. It prevents a conflict of interest, and it also prevents a public bias being presented against the person to be established before going to trial. We also have a section where we clarified the language which specifies what happens if the owner cannot be contacted. This is RSA 644:8, section 4A, hyphen A. We clarified the language which specifies what happens if the owner cannot be contacted or is not present when law enforcement arrives. And the assessment is made that the animals must be taken into protective custody and placed somewhere temporarily. It is specified that only law enforcement or an animal control officer can take custody of animals, and animals cannot be taken into temporary protective custody unless the owner or caretaker is not present, or if there is a clear and imminent danger to the animal's health. Animal seizures should be a matter between law enforcement, an attending veterinarian, and the owner of the animals. No other entity should be involved. This section also directs how and when a person's animals and property may be returned. Additionally, we want to make sure that an owner of an animal taken into protective custody has the right to have their animal examined by a veterinarian of his or her choice at the expense of the owner. We want to make sure that the veterinarian examining the animal in question is familiar with the animal in question. Aside from the fact that we cannot have a dog or cat veterinarian making assessments on animals they are unfamiliar with, like livestock, goats, horses, pigs, etc., but we also want to make sure that if the animal is already being treated for an illness, that the veterinarian there that is involved, could be involved in the treatment, is involved in this situation. We must recognize that animals that may appear neglected or abused may actually be elderly or sick and already under the care of a veterinarian. As part of this statute's housekeeping, we wanted to eliminate the part in current law that's on page 2, lines 12 through 26. We are striking that out because that refers to harness or live dog racing, as we do not have that in our state anymore. Further changes in RSA 644:8, section Roman numeral 4-A includes, which ensure that we're saying that when lactating animals are confiscated, that there is proof that the place they will be taken to will provide proper care and have the facilities to accommodate both the lactating females and their offspring. We cannot allow animals to be taken away where there are not proper milking facilities available, or that proper care is not available for a lactating female and its non-weaned babies. For this case in Lee, I understand that lactating females were taken away and were euthanized after developing mastitis because there was no provisions to milk them. Also, babies were taken away from mothers and vice versa. That is very concerning and should never happen. We also have a section here that ensures the person who initiated the complaint or report should not take part in or be present during the investigation unless the person is an employee of a governmental agency. The persons taking possession of any animal seized as a result of a complaint may not be part of the decision to seize the animal. This prevents a conflict of interest. We do not want the person making the complaint or the person receiving animals as a result of a complaint to be part of the investigation, as they may have a biased interest, financial or otherwise, and may have something to gain in the removal or possession of the animal in question. Again, the only people that should be part of the investigation of abuse and neglect is the animal's owner, law enforcement, and a qualified veterinarian who can properly assess what is going on. In this same section, we say simply that if animals are confiscated or taken into protective custody without the owner being charged with a crime, then that is considered theft by unauthorized taking. We also have a section clarifying that any veterinarian or individual requested to provide assistance by law enforcement is protected and held harmless for criminal or civil liability. We need them to be able to do their job without being worried about legal action being brought against them. And then in the end here, we have a section where we are clarifying the duties of the state veterinarian and law enforcement with regard to abuse and cruelty complaints. We made some clarifying changes to RSA 437B:1 regarding the application of the cost of care fund, ensuring that animals were seized properly, and that the individuals with expertise in the care of this type of animal seized were consulted and due process was followed. And finally, we create a study committee in this bill to study RSA 644:8 and RSA 644:8-A through -G to identify possibilities to further clarify, reorganize, and update these statutes. The reason for this is that we want to make sure that the section of law is consistent with current regulatory needs and practices, and that there is no redundancy or outdated or conflicting statutes. We all know that sometimes as we add on or change statutes over the years, it may be beneficial to take a look at the statute as a whole and perhaps reorganize sections of law. We feel strongly that, irrespective of the establishment of a study committee, that all the other changes in this bill of HB 616 should be instituted now to protect animals, owners, and due process in the report, charging, and adjudication of animal abuse and cruelty reports. These are all important changes to the statutes and serve to clarify what should and should not happen in the event of a report of abuse and neglect. There was a lot that went wrong in the Lee case. I will also say that this is not an isolated case, as we've heard from other constituents. Other instances have also come to our attention where an alleged abuse situation probably could have been handled differently by all parties involved. What we see here is that we need some clarity in the law and more education for everyone involved. We do know that law enforcement only receives 2 hours of training in the academy training schedule to go over how to handle animal cruelty reports and what the animal cruelty statutes require. We have other legislation pending that will help address, bolster, and support law enforcement response to animal cruelty reports. We do not expect law enforcement to be veterinarians, but we do want them to have access to the proper veterinary resources to help determine for police and/or animal control officer call whether charges should be filed and what to do after that. These changes that we are proposing to the current law, which were unanimously passed by the House Environment and Agriculture Committee and then by the House in a bipartisan manner, will help make sure that due process is followed and that both people's rights and animal welfare is protected. And I'd be happy to take any questions, but I think we have a lot of people to testify, so I'm sure that they will fill in the gaps if there are any things that I did not cover.
I'm going to stick with you because you seem to have a good working knowledge of your bill. So my first question, maybe the only one I'll ask, is good afternoon, Senator Abbas. If we get, if the police get notice that there's an alleged problem, even at just a wellness check, you call to see if grandma's okay, you live far away, so you want them to do a no-knock warrant, and they can now go to a house. They can enter, they can say, can I come in? And they can sit at the table. My local police officer does this if he, with elderly, make sure they're okay, a wellness type check. And we don't, there was a bill earlier this session that wanted to get written permission to access the house. We denied that. But I'm looking at your bill here with animals. And so if I have, someone calls in an alleged abuse case, would they be allowed to go and visit the home just like they'd go visit a senior who might not be well? Are they allowed to knock and say, can I come in? Do you mind if I just look around?
As far as I understand, yeah.
Okay, so your bill doesn't stop them from doing that.
No.
But then you were requiring, at a certain point, you wanted written notice, like you wanted a waiver when they came in the house, right, in this bill? Don't
No.
you want something on,
No, but what we're saying is that if the owner is given any documents to sign,
okay. But
say
you're not
they want.
saying they have to sign a
No,
document. You're
no,
just
but
saying
if they are
were.
given any documents to sign,
Okay,
perhaps giving away custody of their animals, ownership, or whatever, that should be fully explained to the person who is expected to sign those documents.
very good, thank you. Go ahead, Senator Elshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Representative Aaron. What struck me is on the first page of the bill, on line 13, that it sets up, I'm a little worried, and I'd love for a little more explanation into it. And there are so many, I just want to preface my question with, there are so many complaints and concerned calls that come in for all manners of animals. So I'm very reticent to litigate anyone's particular situation here because there have been a number of situations. But in a lot of situations where there are animals that are, there is a complaint that goes out that someone is concerned that animals are in distress and a wellness check has to happen. And perhaps the responding officers or the town that it happens in doesn't have animal control, so they have to call in someone else. I'm worried that on line 13, we're immediately setting up a criminal situation where we know that not every wellness check or complaint results in charges. And I don't know that we want to go down that road to have every single complaint have to immediately escalate to a charge or not. Is where is there in the bill space for, education of, perhaps, a hoarding situation or a neglect where someone thought they were doing the right thing for their animal, but they weren't? Like, where's that space to do the education so someone doesn't have to be charged?
Yeah, no, somebody doesn't have to be charged.
Yeah.
And this is not saying that they would have to be charged. It's saying that their animals can't be taken from them unless they're charged with a crime. So, I mean, yes, if somebody sees, a horse in the field that doesn't look right or whatever, and maybe you want to call local animal control to find out what's going on with that. The local animal control or law enforcement would go to the owner and say, hey, what's going on? And the owner might say, well, this and such, whatever the situation is. And if there's no water there for the horse or something, the owner would then be, they could give them some education and say, it's a hot day, you should have some water available for the animal or whatever. So there is room absolutely for education and for that to happen. But my concern is mostly about how and when animals can be seized.
Can I follow up, Mr. Chair? Thank you. Okay, so when an evaluation has been made that an animal or animals, multiple animals are in distress for a variety of reasons: neglect, abuse, lack of education. We know that most people want to do the right thing by their animals, and some people get overwhelmed or actually don't realize how many is too many or how their animals are suffering. And it happens that animals do have to be taken away because they are in distress. They are neglected. They have been abused. And when they are taken away, we don't have anywhere to put them in New Hampshire. Like, we don't run a state animal sanctuary. We have other nonprofit groups take care of that for us.
Mm-hmm.
And we also don't fund that up front. So when a whole barn full of dogs who are being confiscated have to be taken care of, an animal welfare organization has to now take care of those animals. And it is not unusual to reach out to the community for help because now you're taking on a massive amount of animals that have been, in the moment brought into a shelter situation. Why shouldn't they be able to reach out to the community for help? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I don't think animals should be taken from their owners unless they're charged with a crime. And secondly, because, if there's abuse and neglect going on, you charge them with the crime of abuse and neglect. If there's, not any abuse and neglect going on, and their animals, you could talk to the owner and say, this and such needs to be changed. Whatever you're doing is, you educate them. That's where you can do that. But, and so far as any organization taking protective custody or custody of the animals, I don't see that they should be able to fundraise off of the situation unless the person has been found guilty. Because, as I said, then what that does is it creates a conflict of interest. as I said in my testimony, that, you know, we want to make sure that there's no public bias that's created against a person before, or established before they go to trial. These seizure incidents shouldn't be used for purposeful gain, especially if the case has not yet been adjudicated. And I mean, there's plenty other ways that these organizations can fundraise, but they shouldn't specifically target one particular case and be able to make money off of it.
Can I follow up? So do you have an example of animal welfare organization that's actually making money off of this scenario versus meeting the needs that the animals have for food and shelter and, needing to be, veterinary care? We've had examples of a couple in this state of massive hordes of dogs that had to be taken away. And the time between a charge and the conviction can be very, very long. Mm-hmm. And one of the cases from a couple years ago took 2 years to work its way through the courts. So who's paying to keep those animals healthy? Who's paying for their shelter? How do we get people to come and volunteer to walk them when we can't talk about it?
We do have a state cost of care fund.
Only afterwards, though. It's not an upfront fund, is it? It is.
Well, the Commissioner of Agriculture can answer that, but I just feel that.
Oh, wait, one last question. Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your answer. I apologize.
So there is a cost of care fund, and there are other means by which these organizations can raise money. They send out press releases about specific animals that they've seized when the case has not even been adjudicated yet. And so I feel that it creates a conflict of interest here. And I feel that it also gives them, it also gives an incentive for these organizations to seize animals, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative, for taking my question. Was there any concerns brought up, and I apologize, I missed part of your testimony, but about if a veterinarian is going to accompany the police to what is essentially a potential crime scene, about the concerns of the safety of the veterinarian. Not every seizure of property goes as planned. So I guess my question is, any concerns about the safety of the veterinarian who may not have the training the same as a law enforcement officer?
I guess I don't understand your question as to why the veterinarian would be at risk.
Well, if I may follow up. Not every time the police show up somewhere, it's as welcoming as we all hope. And if they're going to be seizing property of someone, or animals in this case, that sometimes that could be easily met with resistance from the person who owns those animals. And I guess in that scenario, are there any concerns about the safety of the veterinarian who's not, I assume, doesn't have the same training and skill set as a police officer?
Well, I would imagine law enforcement would be at the scene, so it would appear to me that they would be able to control the situation.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, thank you very much for your testimony.
Okay. I also have copies of my testimony.
Very good.
Sure.
Thank you. Brianna, I'm going to bring you back with the fancy eye that looks like a J. O'Brien. How you doing, Officer O'Brien?
I'm good. How are you? I actually have copies of my testimony as well. Would you like that beforehand?
That'd be awesome. Sure. Yeah.
All right. May I start by bringing up a previously brought up point?
You did so well last time without reading.
Oh, thank you.
So we'll
Appreciate
read
it.
your stuff, so I love you just to talk to.
Sure. Cost of care, to my knowledge, is post-incident. So you get, the shelter would be reimbursed, the shelter that's caring for the animal will be reimbursed up to like, I think it's less than 50% of the costs that they put into the animal's care. So to begin with, chairpersons and honorable members of the Senate Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Bjarna O'Brien, and I serve as Animal Control Officer for the Salem, New Hampshire Police Department. I am here to express my strong opposition to House Bill 616 because the bill would make it harder for law enforcement to protect animals from cruelty and neglect, and in many cases would force us to put animals back into dangerous situations. One of the biggest problems with this bill is that it handcuffs law enforcement. Right now, when animal control officers encounter a situation where animals are suffering, we work with the police department and prosecutors to assess the situation, taking into account the mental health, physical health, and other struggles of the owner. Sometimes people need more help than punishment, and our goal is to find the most humane solution for everyone involved, including the people. This would keep us from being able to do that. Under this bill, if police don't press criminal charges, removing an animal from its home for its own safety would result in being charged with theft. That means the animal, whether they are emaciated, sick, or neglected, would be forced to go right back to the same conditions where they were suffering. That's not justice, that is continued animal cruelty. This bill also bans critical fundraising that supports the care of rescued animals. Shelters and nonprofits rely on donations to pay for food, medical treatment, and housing while animals are in protective custody. If that funding is cut off, either animals will go without care or taxpayers will be forced to pick up the tab themselves. It also means we lose access to outside expertise and support services that are often brought in by those nonprofits. Another huge concern is the requirement that only a veterinarian designated by the state veterinarian's office can assist in livestock cruelty cases. Right now, it is already extremely difficult for us to find a livestock veterinarian who is willing and able to respond to cruelty investigations. As it stands, we already do have to bring livestock veterinarians to a cruelty scene if it's a case with livestock animals because they're not a run-of-the-mill pet. And because of that, we are already finding it quite difficult to check in on cruelty cases at farms or places that have livestock because we can't find veterinarians willing to volunteer their time. The state veterinarian's office does not have a team of veterinarians on standby who can travel across the state at a moment's notice to take this work. They would have to hire or designate multiple new veterinarians, which means more cost and liability for the state, funding with no clear funding plan in place. Meanwhile, animals would be left in pain or distress, but because we can't get a veterinarian on site quickly enough to intervene. In short, this bill does not protect animals. It blocks our ability to help them, punishes the organizations that care for them, and adds cost and complications without offering any true solutions. I respectfully urge you to vote no on House Bill 616. Thank you for your time and for listening to those of us at the front lines of animal welfare. Can I answer any questions?
Thank you very much for your testimony. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
And thank you, Officer O'Brien, for taking my question. You are the Animal Control Officer for Salem.
Yes.
So after going through the academy, what kind of training do you receive either prior to taking this assignment or continuing education for doing this kind of work?
I appreciate you asking that. So myself personally, I was trained by the woman in the back, Jana. She is the Senior Animal Control Officer for the Hudson, New Hampshire Police Department. I also trained at the Windham, New Hampshire Police Department. I was then trained in the evenings by the Animal Control Officer before me, Corey Bliss, who now teaches at Alvern High School. And then on top of that, we do continuing education yearly at UNH with the NICHA program. And then on top of all of that, I am nationally accredited through the national organization that oversees animal control officers with annual continuing education requirements. So I mostly, on average, do about 2 hours of training and outside reading a week.
I'm sorry, a week?
A week, yes.
Follow up. Is there, so the national accreditation that you hold
Yes, NACA.
is, do you meet or have some sort of organization, loose or formal within the state of other animal control officers who also I don't know if the national accreditation is required by the city of Salem. I don't know. I'm not sure if other towns, because it's very local, but
Yeah.
are there other officers in the state and do you all collaborate?
Yes, thank you for asking that. So I'm actually the secretary for the Animal Control Officers Association of New Hampshire. We wanted to speak as an organization, and after speaking to most of our members, we all concluded that we were not for this bill. However, we can't officially make that statement because we couldn't get a quorum, and our bylaws don't allow us to vote online. Most of us had to speak over email because getting 52 people in one room when we all work throughout different parts of the state is very difficult. But we do talk daily online.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank
for your
you.
testimony. Michelle Murch.
I have copies of my testimony. Yes. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Michelle Murch. I am the Equine and Farm Program Manager and Humane Agent at the New Hampshire SPCA. I am strongly opposed to House Bill 616 due to serious concerns about its potential to hinder effective animal cruelty investigations and compromise the welfare of animals throughout New Hampshire. As the Equine and Farm Program Manager, Humane Officer, and retired law enforcement officer, I bring a unique practical perspective to this issue. I have owned and cared for livestock for over 40 years alongside my family, as well as professionally cared for livestock as a manager for the past 20 years. I have received the same training as New Hampshire's active police officers and work in close collaboration with law enforcement agencies following standardized operating procedures and professional investigative protocols at the New Hampshire SPCA. It is important to note that HB 616 is a reaction to incomplete and one-sided information stemming from a specific animal cruelty investigation in Lee, New Hampshire. I assisted on this investigation, which spanned over 3 weeks. This investigation was conducted in compliance with the Governor's Council on Humane Treatment of Animals Investigation Manual and the New Hampshire SPCA's established SOPs alongside with the Lee Police Department. 2 USD accredited veterinarians were present during this case to provide expert assessments and recommendations. These investigations are often emotionally charged and deeply distressing, not only for those involved, but also for the individuals whose animals are at the center of the investigation. However, good intentions on the part of animal owners do not always translate into the ability to provide adequate care. And when herd sizes grow beyond manageable numbers, neglect, whether intentional or unintentional, can lead to serious and ongoing animal suffering. I will skip a few paragraphs because it was already discussed. The New Hampshire SPCA is one of the few facilities in New Hampshire capable of caring for seized livestock, and we provide this service at no cost to the state's taxpayers. Cruelty cases can take 12 to 18 months to resolve in court, and during that time, the New Hampshire SPCA cares for the animals, the living evidence, on behalf of law enforcement. While the cost of care fund helps cover a portion of these expenses, it does not cover the full cost of care, which is substantial. HB 616 would prohibit soliciting donations for the care of these animals before a conviction is secured, which could severely limit our ability to provide this vital service. If shelters like the New Hampshire SPCA are unable to fundraise, municipalities and by extension, taxpayers will bear the financial burden. Officers of duly licensed humane societies, or humane officers, are trained specialists with deep expertise in animal welfare and cruelty investigations. They play crucial roles in ensuring animals are handled compassionately and in accordance with legal standards. Law enforcement often relies on humane officers for guidance and support in these cases. Removing humane officers from the investigative process would leave animals more vulnerable and could lead to cases being mishandled or overlooked altogether. While police officers are highly skilled in many areas, they do not typically possess the same depth of knowledge in animal welfare and cruelty cases as humane officers. Amending state law in reaction to a single case or event can create lasting unintended consequences. For example, the current statute allows for flexibility in situations where separating lactating animals from their offspring may be necessary for the animal's well-being. Overly prescriptive language could result in rigid one-size-fits-all responses that are not in the best interest of the animals. In conclusion, House Bill 616, as written, would undermine the integrity of animal cruelty investigations, limit the critical role of duly licensed humane societies, and jeopardize the welfare of the animals in New Hampshire. It would also create significant financial challenges for shelters, law enforcement, and ultimately burden taxpayers. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Senator, staff, folks. My name is Benjamin Leonard. I'm a resident of Pembroke, New Hampshire. I'm also a soldier, and I also own a farm. My farm helps me with my PTSD and also helps other veterans of my friends with their issues. A couple things. First of all, I'm in support of this bill. I have firsthand been involved in this process, which was not found guilty of any charges at all, but yet went through the process, which is very emotional, very costly, and very stressful. There's a couple things that I want to highlight in support of this bill. One is I don't know all the details. I just recently learned about this bill in this hearing just a few days ago, so I was happy I was able to make it. But I can tell you firsthand that when organizations come to your home with police and then you are very overwhelmed emotionally, physically, psychologically, stressful, and there's essentially threats that either you turn over your animals or you're going to be brought to court with criminal charges. I will tell you that's very overwhelming for somebody who very well educated. I had my lawyer on the phone. I had my friend next to me. I was still taken back by it. Now, ultimately, I did not turn over my animals and I went through the judicial process. But I will tell you that it's very easy for somebody to be manipulated and not understanding of what is happening. So I don't know how it's possible, but if there is a way to put some type of edit in there to allow a grace period for someone to have a third party consult what they're signing, maybe 2-3 days, nothing crazy, but just something where they could have someone else review and understand the documents, because the emotional stress that's going on right now, that you cannot think correctly. Secondly, I want to thank the representative for bringing this up, and I strongly encourage law enforcement to have additional training within their program on livestock and equines. 150 years ago, everybody in this room would have some type of livestock, right? That's just the way it is. It's very small percentage nowadays. Under section 3, one recommendation is to have a location of where the livestock or any seized animals would be going. When I had my animals seized, I had no idea where they were going. I was not given any information of the location of where they would be present. So I would just ask that a location and visitation to be able to happen. Under section 6, it talks about care. And there are certain circumstances where animals need care. I'm all for that. My only request is that a notice to the owner on what care is being happened, either in writing, email, phone call, something. If there's obviously an owner they can be in contact with. And what I mean by that is even if it's routine shots, if the farrier, whatever it may be, just some type of notice, not months after the fact. And then under section 8, the cost of the care, which the cost has been talked about multiple times. When it talks about 14 days or longer, in some cases, it took me 4 months to get my animals back. But even though I wasn't charged with anything, there was still a cost, right? And I understand nonprofit organizations, they do great things. They have a cost associated with taking care of animals too. But if somebody's not found guilty of any charges, why should that person be held responsible for having the seizure of their animals in the care, in the boarding, in the transportation, to pay that back when I, as a citizen, wasn't found guilty of anything? If you are found guilty, absolutely. You should absolutely burden that cost. But there should be something in there that if not found guilty, you should not have to burden the cost of those boarding. I think those are the major highlights that I have. Are there any questions from the board? All right, thank you.
Well, I did sign on. Yes, I would.
Is there a second page? Oh, okay.
I was going to ask to go later, but I think I'm aggravated enough that I probably ought to go now before I actually
Good
explode.
to see you, Commissioner. How you?
Good, Mr. Chairman, good to see you.
Breathe in, breathe out. Okay, now go.
So
Do you have
most
written
of,
testimony for us?
I'm afraid I've got a page,
Okay.
but I'm going to deviate.
So deviate, yeah, flip over the script and just talk to us.
I need to, because I'm going to ask you to ask yourselves, the testimony that you've heard against 616, have you heard anyone actually speak to the verbiage? I haven't. So they're talking about theories on things that just don't actually exist. Right now, as the law exists today, animals may not be seized unless charges are filed. The reality of that is that often we, and when I say we, the department often accompanies law enforcement, go in and do an evaluation. And in cases where particularly we know that the person does not intend not to harm the animals, but they are asked to surrender those animals. The animals are surrendered, then they become the property of the police department, and they can be disposed of however they wish at that time. So, but what's happened here is that two sections of the law seem to be confused by law enforcement. I've had these discussions. One is the first section where you get a warrant, you go in and you serve it, you do the evaluation, you decide whether those animals should be surrendered, you give them that option, or if not, they are arrested. The second is the one that talks about protective custody. A clear, plain meaning of those two sections is protective custody is when someone sees animals in distress and there is no one home. There's no one there who can make that decision. So they're taken into protective custody. And if after 7 days, this is current law, and this is why you leave where the animals have been, because there's nobody to tell. You don't need to leave written notice, although you could, but it's not required by law if you're seizing them. But this is protective custody. If the animal has not been returned or claimed, the officer shall petition the municipal or district court seeking either permanent custody or a 1-week extension custody, or shall file charges. So that's what's getting all mixed up here. And what happened in Lee, I don't even really want to go into, because I was a legislator, as you know, for 23 years. I never worked on legislature looking at one particular issue or two particular issues. What was the application of the law overall and how was it written? This law is a mess, because it also talks about an officer of a officer of a humane society being able to seize animals, of a licensed one. There are no licensed societies in the state of New Hampshire. We license facilities, we don't license organizations. So that needs to come out, that helps clarify, and that's why we need to clarify that this is only when no one is there. I've had people talk to me about, what if the person is bedridden and can't make a decision? Well, you don't want to arrest them, but at that point, they need to surrender the animals. And if they're not, and they don't have anybody to care for them, you don't have any other choice other than to seize and file charges. In some cases, animals are seized, but maybe only one, and the others are surrendered, and there's only one charge. There's any number of things that can happen, and this law does not prevent it. Again, because nothing that you've heard speaks to any of the language in the bill. And it's very disappointing to see that. A case that happened where my employees went on a seizure of horses, our recommendation was that those animals all be seized at that time. The police refused to do that and only took a couple of them. Then they brought us back a few weeks later. The animals continued to deteriorate. We recommended taking more. I recommended taking them all. Ultimately, I had to tell the chief of police we weren't going back anymore because it was inhumane to my employees to watch these animals literally die when they wouldn't seize them. So there's two sides to every story. Sure there are. And there's my side to one story. But this bill was worked with the Farm Bureau, with Chairman Aaron, with others over the summer. We worked on it again afterwards. And it does not take away any rights of anyone. It protects the rights of animal owners and it protects the animals because there are so many options. But you would never allow someone to go in another circumstance and seize private property without due process and without charges being filed. This legislature, I don't think any legislature in the country would ever say, oh yeah, well, you just get to go in and take personal items and no charges filed. Just think about that idea because these animals are personal property by law. If you want to change that, you can do that. But until you do, they are personal property. I'll be glad to answer any questions. And I'm sorry I'm so emotional about this. I didn't anticipate being emotional about it till I heard the testimony that did not actually address what's in the bill.
Great testimony, Commissioner. Any questions? Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Jasper. I'm wondering, in previous testimony, there was an allusion to the cost of the care.
Yes.
So could you explain, go through the process to explain the process of when an animal does need to be seized because of abuse or neglect, and then they're put in the care and custody of one of our organizations in the state that helps animals. Where does the money come from to pay for that animal's care the first day it lands at the shelter?
So there is a lag.
I'm sorry?
There is a lag in the
A lag,
payment
I'm
because
sorry,
it's a
lag.
quarterly payment, but prior to the cost of care, it was all on the municipality. Now, two ways can be done. The entity agreeing to accept the animals can charge money to the town, the municipality up front and say, we need these funds. The town would pay them. We would then reimburse them later. One of the things that we discovered, and we made a change last year, was that particularly in small towns, because of the way the municipal budget law works, that fund that money came from, when we pay the town, would go into the general fund, not back to that account. So we made a change to allow for the towns to have these entity that is taking the animals paid directly so that the town's not any money. But there's still, a 3-month delay, but that's much better than there was. The reality there is, relative to the fundraising, think about this. If you're using those animals to fundraise and you're still entitled to daily care, you can't tell, and we can't get into the books of how much money was raised for those particular animals. That could very well result in double dipping because they're going to raise this money on this poor animal and then we're going to pay them for the cost of care. And I would suggest the rates are more than fair. We have absolutely had no complaints about the rates that we allow for the animals. But this would prevent that double dipping and allow animals which still belong, in theory, to somebody else because it hasn't been adjudicated to be used for fundraising. They can use their society, they can use generalities, but not those specific animals.
Can I follow up? Could you, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Can we go to the daily care again? So how much does the state pay for the daily care? And is it is it different for a dog than for
It is. And
a horse, for a pig?
Yes.
Do we have a rate card?
They are numbers that were developed by the state vet. I don't have those in front of me for the different animals based on what we believe that is the average charge. He went to so many different organizations to look at what is the average cost. These were real costs developed by the state veterinarian to determine what was a reasonable number. It's not the high number and it's not the low number. It's the average.
Can I follow up? So in developing those I'm gonna, for lack of another term, unless there is a term for it, the rate card for the different cost per animal. In determining what the average charge would be, is that taken into, is it the fact that this particular animal, I'm going to say a pig, for example, if a pig is taken into custody, and is the average charge reflective of a pig that is possibly malnourished or needs wound care or is disabled or has a broken bone? Because animals don't get taken into custody when they're healthy and they only need to be fed and watered twice a day. So how is that cost figured out?
So thank you for the question. I think that's a good question. So you're not going to overfeed the pig all at once. That could lead to worse things. But I think that, because the rate is as high as it is, because most of it is not about food, it's about the actual care, that I think that is not an issue. In terms of if there is a wound and there needs surgery, there is a limit, because at some point you've got to say, all right, you can't put $100,000 into a pig. So there is a limit, and their decisions have to be made as to whether the animal should be euthanized. But we do allow for reasonable care. If you just want to trim its toenails, we're not going to pay for trimming toenails. But we will take care for necessary medical care as determined by the state veterinarian when he's looking at the reimbursement. He goes over, I don't make the decision myself, he goes over those and makes recommendations to me as to what is a reasonable cost as set in statute.
Last one.
So thank you for following this thread with me. So in determining the reasonable care, do I understand it's not really a set amount? Because an animal that's taken into the care and custody of one of our organizations to receive veterinary care that could include surgery or could include situational wound care or malnutrition or any of these things, the differentiation in cost from a surgery to some wound care is very, very different. So is the department evaluating that cost of care on an individual basis, or how is that determination made?
So there is a daily rate, sort of like if you were going to the hospital and you're just going to have a daily rate if they didn't give you anything. Then there are all the things they do while you're in the hospital. And so the state vet would look at those charges. We had to, give it a flea bath because it was totally covered in fleas. Now, we're not always going to pay for a bath if there's no evidence and no certification by the veterinarian in charge has to certify that what is being done is necessary care. So we will pay for those costs. Those aren't set in statute. Those will look at that. Okay, it was $50 for this, and 2 veterinarians have decided that it's necessary, and we pay for that. For surgery, up to a set amount is reasonable. So it's a detailed process that is not just arbitrary.
Yes, Senator Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for taking my question. And do you have the copy of the bill in front of you?
I do.
On the first page, line 3 to 6, and I read this a few times, and I just want to be interpreting correctly, but it says, who shall set probable cause criteria for taking of the animal? I assume that would still be the police officer, but they're relying on the state veterinarian, or is the veterinarian present setting the criteria?
So in this bill, and we will endeavor to have a state veterinarian there whenever possible, but it's not always possible. And so their designee is the important thing. Now, in many cases, that is going to be our vet techs, could be the assistant state veterinarian, or it could be someone, and we've had these discussions, someone who has an expertise in a particular type of animal. Say it was a dairy animal, and we've got a dairy farmer who says, yeah, if you need me, I will come in, take a look at these animals, and tell you what I think. And he would set the cost. He'd say, look, here's the problem here, here's the problem here. And then he'd set the criteria, but ultimately it is up to the police officer to decide whether, based on that criteria, whether the animal should be seized, because it is only an officer who could do this.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jasper, no manicures for pigs. Got it. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate your testimony. Representative Kelly Potenza. Hi, Rep. Potenza. How you doing today?
Good, thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for the record, Representative Kelly Potenza, Stratford District 19. I sit on Environment and Agriculture. I sat through this hearing, which was very, very long, several hours. And I just wanted to say that this bill went through so much work. Listening to Commissioner Jasper, I was in the back row having the same frustrations because, you know, we've got to read the language of the bill, and most of the stuff that we're talking about here is currently in law. Senator Abbas, when you're talking about, you know, the state veterinarian, those are already things in statute. And I think it's really key where we say, or their designee. All of these things were discussed exhaustively in our committee. And this came out 100% support. It's a bipartisan bill, and it fixes inherent things that are broken. And the whole point is if a person is charged, if someone's doing a well check, all of those types of things can still continue to happen. This really has to do with seizing animals, having due process, and they have to be charged. And if you're being charged for something, this is on the first page, line 12 to 14, it's pretty clear. Whoever is there that is offering that whatever information or whatever documents, whatever charges, for them to be able to explain that in a calm manner so someone can understand what they're signing off on is critically important. There was another piece that was talked about too. This is on page 2, Senator Altshuler, lines 15 to 17. This is not about any organization that is looking to fundraise. Let's just say, for example, they just took in a lot of animals. Just say, hey, we've got 19 cows that we're taking care of. We really need your help. That's not going to stop any of that. It is literally using someone's name, where they are. They haven't been convicted of anything. So that's the piece there. It's protecting people in their privacy rights. So, and I can tell you right now on Facebook, there were ads that were done that are basically, convicting people before they were convicted of anything. And that's where this line is here. We don't want any of these organizations, which literally are wonderful organizations, to be, have their hands tied. We just want to make sure that that things aren't used in a negative way, in a negative light. Because I'm telling you right now, in many situations where there were open farms and all of that, they're not open anymore. They're closed. There were schools that used to bring their children to places. It was wonderful that what we used to have. And they've closed off all of that because of things that have happened. And people were, convicted through the court of public opinion before they were convicted at all in New Hampshire. So I think that's important. And then, of course, on page 3, line 30, I think this is important as well. This is already in statute, but then it's expanded. A veterinarian licensed to practice in the state and any individual requested to provide assistance by law enforcement or the state veterinarian. That means that local municipalities and law enforcement can use the amazing resources that we have, because there's people that have expertise in certain types of animal, livestock, all of that. So this bill has gone through so much work, and in a wonderful bipartisan way. I have to say our committee is the best committee in the State House, and there's just this really is fixing some inherent problems, and I'm really hope that you guys look at this closely, and if there's any problems that they have, that you speak with the commissioner and of course with our chairwoman, because we really want this to move forward.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you. Oh. Are you open to a question?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So going back to the section on page 2 that you were talking about, lines 15 through 17, it doesn't, the bill doesn't itemize out or say anything about, people. It actually just talks about the animals. So I hear your intent of not wanting people to, have to undergo scrutiny before a lawsuit goes forward, but this doesn't do that. And how do you stop anybody from saying something online? And why wouldn't somebody, I actually watched the House hearing, so to prepare for this, and one of the issues that was brought up, and I don't think it came to a conclusion, was if somebody is the person whose animal was seized and they want to launch a GoFundMe so that they can raise money for their legal defense, if they would not be able to do that under this. Like they can't use their own animals as a fundraising tool. They would not be able to do that. So I'm just curious, like this bill doesn't talk about people. And if it does somewhere else, could you please point that out?
Yeah, I don't read that as, maybe you just found something that's an issue, but I don't read it that someone, for example, that had their animal seized, that wanted to do their own personal GoFundMe or something like that for their legal defense. I don't see that being here, because it says, shall be used in any manner to solicit donations or raise funds by any individual organization that has protective custody of the animal. It's the person it's the organization that has the protective custody of the animal or animals prior to conviction of abuse or neglect under this section. I think we did argue this a lot in our committee, if you watched it, because this was discussed a lot. And I do believe that this was the best wording that we came to. So without trying to give, and if you want specific examples, I'm sure I can get you screen captures of them. But farms were named, people's names were, that's what I'm saying. It wasn't just, hey, we've received 19 dogs or anything like that, and we really need your help. And it wasn't like that. There were farms named, names named, and that's where people come out with pitchforks. I mean, you know how it is, and that's where it gets, the social media and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you can have things where there's defamation and all that, but it's just that it was the piece that it was used in a negative way, in the sense of saying these people are guilty. They're horrible people. They abuse their animals, and let's raise a lot of money to help those animals. That's the piece that's wrong, and that's what we're trying to stop. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, it protects everybody that's involved. Protects the homeowner, to the property owner, protects the animals, and it also protects people. We just need to start being kind, and unfortunately, a lot of people aren't.
So I understand the intent. I get the intent of not wanting to convict in the court of public opinion. This doesn't necessarily do that, because you cannot address the local newspaper, the radio station, the television station from, covering a story of a big confiscation of animals by the state. That's separate. That is separate. And this says that the organizations that are going to do the care and keeping can't ask for help in the care and keeping. And so how do we justify not paying, having a 3-month lag in getting money to these organizations who are doing the care and keeping from being able to ask for the help that they need to do that job, if we're not going to pay for it right away?
Yeah, I think this all has to do with, as long as we're kind of crossing all our Ts and dotting all our Is in the right way, and that we're confiscating animals all in doing it lawfully, I don't think that this is going to be an issue at all. And I understand that there's a time frame. I understand from the time that someone is charged and their animals are confiscated. I get all of that. And I know that the media can report those stories. I understand that. But convicting someone in the court of public opinion before there is a conviction, I think is just heading us down that road. And so I understand where you're coming from, but I still think that this is valid, and I think it should be applied universally. So, the commissioner said that the funds are sufficient, and I'm gonna have to go with that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative, for taking my question. Just sticking with page 2, lines 15 to 17. I think one issue I had in my mind was, so it says it's used in any manner, right? And I certainly appreciate, and I agree with you, the paid ads online, that identifies a farm specifically or a person being charged with the crime wouldn't be appropriate. But let's just say they had, there was a fundraiser and they had a picture of one of the animals that were sheltered there. That would still be used for fundraising purposes. So is there a way perhaps we can address that language and maybe narrow it down to address the issue that you raised?
I would be okay with that. Would you be okay with that? Yeah, I think that's fine. That's absolutely fine.
And the concern I can imagine is someone makes the video highlight reel and there's a picture of an animal that shouldn't be on there, but then again, they would be in violation of this law.
And I know that we've all seen the television commercials, they happen, especially during, of course, holiday season and stuff like that, that show animals in situations with abuse. And I understand that. It pulls on people's heartstrings. So I can't, I don't see a problem with any of that. It's just when it becomes specific, targeted. These people are guilty, they're awful, that kind of piece. And I think that, but they should be able to utilize the animals that are in their care in that way. If they need to fundraise, I understand. I'd be fine with that. So I'm not the sponsor of this, I would check with them and stuff, but you guys, this is your bill now, but I would be okay with that. And she said she would be too.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with reference to this, we have not seen any press releases, any documentation from the shelters that take these animals in when they are seized for abuse and neglect. The shelters are not saying, we took an animal from such and such, so-and-so's house. They don't do that. They say, we have custody of so many animals, we need some help. I don't know that this is addressing a problem that actually exists because the shelters are not naming the names. If a newspaper article names the names, then I'm sorry, I don't know what you're waving at me.
Yeah, here's a news release that was from the New Hampshire SPCA that actually did
names
that.
the name of a person.
Names the name of the farm and yeah. Would you like it?
I would love it. Yeah.
I think we got this.
Did we? I don't have that here. Or I might, but there's 1,000 papers.
I might have stolen this.
Our Senator Abbott took mine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, honorable senators, Chairman Gannon, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I'm Tad Dione. I'm the chief of police for the Hudson Police Department. We're nationally accredited. I've been a police officer for 27 years. I'm sitting here with Jana McMillan, who's been the animal control supervisor for the Hudson Police Department for 26 years. In my opinion, she is a subject matter expert. On March 25th, the House statement was issued regarding this bill 616 with regards to animal cruelty law. Representative Aaron opened her statement basically saying essentially this bill and its amendment makes several changes to the existing law to clarify the law and to ensure that due process is followed in animal welfare with regards to the complaints and animal confiscation. She closed with, lastly, the bill sets up a study committee to review all the animal cruelty statutes to be examined with an eye to clarify, reorganize, and update the law. The bill and its amendment was a collaboration of New Hampshire Farm Bureau, New Hampshire Department of Agriculture, UNH Extension, and our committee to address many problems which occurred during a horrific taking of dairy goats in Lee, New Hampshire, April 24th, when 45 animals were taken, 22 were subsequently euthanized. As you can see, many people collaborated in that bill, which clearly affects law enforcement and animal control officers. Yet law enforcement was not on this collaboration. We were not invited to speak with this. This is unfortunate because law enforcement has a dual role of protecting personal property and protecting the animals. We're also the ones who work directly in this field. The bill, in the statement, it singles out a one particular case in Lee, New Hampshire. Is all the legislation here because of one particular case? And if so, was the outcome irrefutable? Or is there another side to this story? The New Hampshire Association of Chiefs of Police, who I represent here today, opposes this bill as it's amended. There may be some good intentions, like some updates, some language changes that are needed, but in general, it affects many RSAs. We believe that it should be broken down perhaps into several bills, which deal with like issues on each one. We do not feel this bill clarifies anything. Mandating a state veterinarian or the designee can set probable cause for seasoned livestock will definitely overburden the state veterinarian. Will certainly slow down an investigation, which could be detrimental to the animal's health. Also, it places a higher burden of establishing probable cause than any other criminal case. Probable cause is a burden to establish a seizure of evidence. It is to be established in a criminal case in an infinite number of ways. In this bill, I should say it also is established under the guise of a reasonable, prudent person. In this particular bill, it mandates that it is established by a certain person, state veterinarian. The bill literally establishes evidence such as neglected or suffering livestock can only be seized if someone is arrested. That's a much higher burden than any other criminal case in the state, anywhere that I know of. I can tell you, we seize evidence all the time. We seize evidence all the time without charging people. And I'll make that clear. And the burden for us in probable cause, the burden is probable cause, and the burden for us is to show that evidence of a crime can be found in a certain location. The burden is not to charge somebody. That happens if we can establish who we're going to charge and we feel we have the strength of a case to do it. But in any other criminal case, if there's a crime scene and there's a bloody knife on the ground and we're investigating a stabbing, we seize, with the search warrant, we seize the bloody knife. That doesn't mean I can establish who had it or why they used it at that point. So an arrest isn't going to be made until we get to that point. This bill is clearly forcing law enforcement to make an arrest. It doesn't give us the opportunity to discuss what's the culpable state of mind of the owner of the animals. Are there physical disabilities? Are there mental health limitations? Is there an overwhelming situation at hand that we're not aware of yet? What's the strength of the state's case on the matter? Should we even bring it forward to a judge? Will they laugh us out of court because we brought something forward that isn't strong enough to prosecute? The bill states that if livestock owner is arrested and required to sign a form, that law enforcement will ensure the owner affirms that they understand the signing. Even if that is written into law, we cannot force someone to affirm that they understand what they know that they're signing. There's no way we can do that, right? Case law is still law, and that won't happen. Most important, and I will say there is some language here that needs to be looked at. There was some admitting of language. It wasn't struck through or put in brackets, and it just disappeared in the bill. Specifically, that is if RSA 644-8, Roman numeral 4A and 7B, and also 7C. They're not there. But lastly, I'll sum this up with the New Hampshire Association of Chiefs of Police is a major stockholder in protection of personal property and protections of animals and livestock. We're not saying the current statute needs no work at all. Instead, we're willing to work together. We strongly believe a committee, which includes law enforcement, should first be formed before any changes are made. Please do not pass this bill as is. I'm happy to take any questions you might have for me. Thank you.
Is that better? Oh, yeah, that's loud. Okay, sorry about that. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Lisa Boyer. I am a licensed veterinarian, and I have over 2 decades of experience in both livestock and small animal medicine. I have worked with animal welfare agencies throughout the United States in multiple jurisdictions, and I'm also a court-qualified expert in animal abuse, cruelty, and welfare. I am a New Hampshire licensed veterinarian, and I'm also a former FBI agent, so that gives me some unique qualifications for these types of cases. I am here today to strongly oppose the bill as it's written on a number of reasons, which I have detailed out in my testimony. However, I do want to address the reasons behind this bill, because I was one of the veterinarians on site in the case where this bill came out of. I wasn't able to testify at the earlier House committee, unfortunately wasn't available. So in general, I am a staunch advocate of personal property rights. I do not ever want to seize an animal from an owner. I recognize the dramatic impact that can have emotionally and financially on an owner. I've seen cases go wrong in other states where I wasn't involved, and I'm very cognizant when I go in on a scene with law enforcement to make an independent assessment and advise. I don't tell anybody to seize an animal. My job is to say whether, in my professional opinion, there is animal abuse, neglect, or cruelty. I think it's a big mistake to make us have criminal charges against somebody in order to seize an animal. It removes all compassion that we can work with an animal owner. In this particular, and I hope you'll allow me a little more time, 30 seconds? Okay, I'm sorry. In this situation in particular, there are people who were contacted 6 times. We gave all the education we could. We said, these are the things that need to be done. And when I come back and there are animals actively dying on property, I have no choice. And that's the issue. And there was nothing done. In fact, I contacted the person's veterinarians and said, did she even make an appointment like that was asked at the first time? No. So people are given ample opportunity. Seizure is a last resort.
I also want to say I am not just a dog and cat vet. I'm USDA accredited. I take ongoing continuing education. I also would like to say that most importantly, that when veterinarians have an oath to protect animals and for forcing us to walk away from a scene where animals are actively suffering is not acceptable. You're causing us to violate our oath. I want people to have farms. I want everybody to have their rights. But when an owner won't cooperate, that's when we get into a problem. Education's great, but I shouldn't have to charge somebody, not me, but law enforcement shouldn't have to charge criminally when really we want what's in the best interest of everybody to protect the animals. Okay. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dr. Boyer, for taking my question. I'm looking through your testimony and I'm a little confused about the part where someone who files a complaint, which, could be you. You don't work for the state, correct?
I do not work for the state. I'm independent veterinarian, and I don't file a complaint. I am often contacted by organization, law enforcement, humane officer agency, and say, can you come out and assist us and make an evaluation whether or not there is any neglect or cruelty?
Follow up? Yes. So at that time, if you're contacted by local law enforcement, Officer Chief Dione,
yes,
and says, I believe I've received a complaint. Can you come help us evaluate? You then go and make a recommendation.
I will go examine the premise, the animals with law enforcement, and I do want to mention I don't have regard for my safety at all because the scene is always secured before we would walk in, and we stay back because that's not my job any longer. And so I would then go in and do my investigation in connection with the humane officers that are there, whether it's the New Hampshire SPCA or the ACO. And then we would talk about the findings and whether there was sufficient cause that the animals were in imminent danger, basically, is how I look at it. Are they in imminent danger? Are they appropriately cared for? And can the person who has these animals appropriately care for them? Mm-hmm. And I use a very loose standard because there's a wide variety of animal welfare standards when it comes to livestock versus companion animals. I also do not ever go in on a case where it's species that I'm not familiar or comfortable with. And I think that's a really important point because it's not, although all veterinarians are trained in multiple species and should be able to recognize that, I think I came from a livestock background the first half of my career. And, it's very important that we recognize that welfare issues are different between companion and livestock.
So when you are doing the evaluation, you made mention in your testimony about there being a space between the initial evaluation and a follow-up to see if some corrective actions are done. So are you saying that there's an opportunity for an animal owner to make some corrective actions so that we don't get to a seizure, the point where there needs to be a seizure? So we're not jumping immediately to criminal action.
100%. I mean, seizure is less than 2% of all cases that I've ever participated in 20 years. This is not something I take lightly, and no veterinarian would. And in fact, in this particular case, I brought a second veterinarian on scene because I wanted to have a second opinion on the situation. I mean, I was confident in my own opinion. However, there were so many animals, and I wanted to really make sure we looked at each and every one. I also want to tell you that no animals were euthanized for mastitis. The only animals that were euthanized were clearly suffering. These animals were in extreme pain, could not walk, they couldn't get up at all. They were actively dying animals on the property. It was not okay. And we first came in, the first time there were not actively dying animals, but the conditions were not good. The animals were painful. We said, if you are able to call your veterinarian out, make an appointment, tell us that show us you have an appointment for a field call, and work on hoof trimming for these animals that can't stand. A lot of them had a disease that was an arthritic disease. Then we'll come back in a few days to see where you're at. On subsequent visits, nothing had been changed. And it's not that Ms. Lee did not have bad intent. She's a lovely lady. I have the utmost empathy for that situation, but there was so much that needed to be done that it would have been hard for anybody to manage that in the size of the herd. And there was not a recognition of pain and suffering for the animals. I mean, so you can educate all you want, but when an owner won't comply with the most basic recommendation of please have somebody come out and help you trim hooves, or please have somebody come, have your veterinarian come out and work with you on this, and you come back and nothing is done over several weeks, and now we're at a point where the animals clearly are in imminent danger, that's when seizure happens and not before that.
Thank you for your testimony.
Okay.
We're all set, thanks. Mary Erosian. Mary, I'm loving you. A little sheet, handwritten. 1 minute's even better. I won't even watch you. Just listen. Thank you. Yes, red. Yep.
There we go.
You're good.
Okay, 27 years ago, Concord didn't have a humane investigator. I recall the day I went into a local drug house. I left with 3 things. A cat hoarder didn't want anymore, the cat's prolapsed uterus hanging out of her, and the maggots that were eating the flesh of the cat's uterus. The wonderful and brilliant Dr. George Messenger saved the cat's life. ACOs and humane investigators are crucial to the protection of our society's animals. I have assisted many police officers in helping animals in a state of neglect. Police departments, unlike ACOs and humane investigators, are not trained to deal with animal neglect, and most don't have the veterinary medical knowledge that ACOs and investigators have. Humane societies pay out of pocket for their humane investigators, so this bill won't save the state or taxpayers any money. I implore you to vote against HB 616, a bill that will surely put animals in a very unprotected and vulnerable state.
Thank you. Any questions? Moving good. Stacy Ober. Good afternoon, Ms. Ober.
Is this still on? Good
still
afternoon,
on.
Chair Gannon, Vice Chair Abbas, and members of the committee. My name is Stacy Ober. I am the Government Relations Manager in New England for the American Kennel Club. We're a 140-year-old nonprofit that is recognized as an expert in canine training, breeding, and responsible dog ownership. I want to acknowledge all the work that Chair Aaron's put into this bill, and the spirit of wanting to make certain that certain gaps in New Hampshire's law could be closed. There's nothing more emotional than the subject of animal neglect and abuse, and no animal is deserving of that treatment. That being said, I did want to convey to the committee that this is not a one incident that resulted in the formulation of this bill. Prior to my coming into the role, of course, we had the Christina Fay case, not affiliated with the American Kennel Club in any way, all of those Great Danes. And House Environment and Ag at that time worked to strengthen and create the cost of care fund, for instance. In the bill, you'll see there's even the expedited 14-day for the confiscation of animals to actually have a status hearing by the court, because it's not in anyone's best interest to have these animals languishing somewhere in the event they are taken into protective custody. I wanted to just note that the spirit of this bill is to say, if in fact the situation is so serious that you are going to seize animals, we're saying that you ought to have really good reason to bring charges against that individual. I will share with you that one of our members had 18 dogs seized a couple of years ago by a humane society. It was more than 2 months before any charges were made aware to the dog owner. There was only, and at that time there was only one charge that was brought because one of the dogs was senior and had an eye issue that looked like it was neglected, but in fact they were under the care of a veterinarian, which is why the law now has the language here saying that a defendant may in fact at their own expense hire a veterinarian to examine the animal to be certain that they can put their defense together. So I wanted to just emphasize that sometimes people are innocent. In that case, the charge was dropped, so charges can be dropped. It's not as if once you bring them, that's the end of it. And lastly, to note that with regard to soliciting donations, there were many press releases that were sent when this individual had those dogs seized. And in fact, multiple media picked up on it. A government agency had links to all of those articles. And after the charges were dropped, law enforcement asked that dog owner to sign a confidentiality agreement and not talk about the fact that the charges were dropped, which I find egregious. And secondly, had to spend a considerable amount of time with Governor Sununu's office asking that links to that media was taken down because it was an attack on this individual's reputation. I'll just last mention that the state of New Hampshire does have in its constitution a right to privacy. And I think the committee ought to take that into consideration as well as we're talking about whether or not to allow anyone involved in protective custody of animals or the investigation to go forward and disclose that evidence via press release or some other social media avenue. I think it's inappropriate. Thank you. We support the bill.
Thank you very much. Seeing no questions, great. John O'Brien. It's Joan, okay. Put the glasses back on. Good afternoon, Ms. O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair Gannon, committee. I'll just talk as requested.
Thank you, ma'am.
So I'm Joan O'Brien. I'm here on behalf of the New Hampshire Animal Rights League. We oppose the bill. We're founded in 1977 on the principle that animals have a right to be free from human harm. There's been mentioned today a lot about the fact that animals are property under the law, and we have to recognize that they're a special kind of property. They can suffer, unlike a car or a bicycle, and that's why the laws are complicated. Also, I think something that got lost along the way and that we should keep in the front of mind is that our animal cruelty laws are here to protect animals, not people. Animals can't get up and get themselves out of a bad situation. If they have an injury, they can't seek out veterinary care. They rely on us. These laws are for them. We're not worried about people being stressed or overwhelmed. When you're accused of something, that's just going to happen. We can't stop that. This bill seems as if it was crafted by farmers for farmers. It's aimed at shielding people who are accused of animal cruelty, not strengthening protections for animals. And I'm concerned that this committee that it calls for forming is just going to do more of the same. Concerned that the bill's removing this critical resource in our humane agents. My organization fields animal cruelty complaints all the time, and we refer people to law enforcement, or we let them know that they can call one of New Hampshire's animal cruelty investigators. We have immense respect for these people. They not only understand the law, but they know how to develop rapport and trust with those who are accused so that they can get the animals out of a bad situation. And a note on the fundraising. We can't stop the court of public opinion. It may be improper to use this information, but it's not against the law. How a charity uses its money, what buckets it puts them in, is between the donor and the charity. And in the case of the NSPCA, they have a 4-star rating on Charity Navigator. You can look and see their finances. It's all transparent. And one thing we do like about the bill is Section 4C. No lactating animal shall be separated from its non-weaned offspring. We wholeheartedly agree. Mothers should not be separated from the nursing young. In fact, we think this should apply to all animals, not just confiscated animals. In the dairy industry, calves are removed from their mothers within hours permanently. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We all set? Great. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Josie Best. The purple, I see it and I see Holy Cross, but I know that's not it.
Oh, that one. Okay. Josie Best. I'm just an ordinary animal person for my whole life, and I've got the gray hair to prove it's been a long, long time. When I heard this story first, and it was not the first of these kinds of stories, after I finished being upset, I immediately said, well, I've got to do something. I've got to start writing. And so I started to try to write something that would protect the animals from the cruelty that was done on that day. There's nothing more cruel than, unless they're really critically ill, of taking an animal from the place that it knows, the area that it knows, the people that it knows. There's suffering that happens right there. So I did write up a thing and took it to Farm Bureau, and we brought it through our county and through the state, and then we started crafting the bill. I did the same thing with Grange, the one organization that hasn't been mentioned. I took it to my local Grange, and then we took it to state Grange, and they passed it too. But it was simply that there needs to be a veterinarian or some kind of authority there to really judge that animals need to be separated and taken somewhere else. And so I've heard all kinds of things today, and I feel like walking out because we're going on and on and on. And I know that they've worked really hard on this bill, and we at Farm Bureau have continued to work hard on it. But it's got so much in it now. I think that I really appreciate the commissioner and the work that he's done to look very much in detail at the laws that we already have. I think that we do need a study. I would like to see this pass so that we can have the study committee, but I do think we need to do some separating of pieces of it. I don't know the law well enough to know what works the best. It worries me that there still hasn't been a court thing about this case. And we haven't solved the problem of charges. It seems to me that it is part of the United States of America that our property is protected unless you have actual charges and legal process to take somebody's property. And I feel that the animals fall into this, but even more so because they have feelings more than most things. I think we need to do a lot of work on this. And I have heard some things in here today that, because I know eyewitnesses who were there, I've heard some completely different stories, and I guess that's the way things go. But we really do need to do something, because when I was growing up in Keene, New Hampshire, there were 12 dairy farms in the city limits of Keene. So I could get on my bike and I could ride to barns and hang around. And I didn't grow up on a farm, but my cousins still own the ancestral farm and run the dairy farm in Sunapee for 150 plus years. And I used to visit that too. And then eventually grew up enough to get into animals. And the animals have taken me around the world. I've been in barns all around the world, including Australia. And yep, I know. What hasn't been brought up was that one of the charges supposedly was about the conditions of the barn, and I will end with that. I've seen the pack called bedding device used all over the world. It is a very good way of husbandry if it is treated right, and there's only one time when it's nasty, besides if you don't take care of it every day, is when you open it up and start removing it from the building. And that's exactly what was happening the day that this thing happened in Lee. That's the only time that it is really offensive, is when you open it up before you get it all out of the barn. And they couldn't do it because they had broken equipment and people not showing up. So I hope we can work on this and take it into pieces and that we can work on and pass it. Thank you.
Close. Close enough. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Eric Sawtell. I do live in Lee. I did submit written testimony to each of you, which I hope you will read, and I don't really want to take any time because most of my points have been covered or will be covered. Thank you. So if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them, but in the interest of time, I'll wait.
John Porter. Hi, John.
Afternoon, John Porter, I'm a dairy specialist. I don't think our intent with this bill, I support it, and our intent wasn't to take away the control of these excessively bad cases, but I think just to create a little pause on these borderline ones, and I think we all agree that taking care of an animal at its site is better than taking it off its site. And I think we just need a little pause on looking at the conditions, and I would say I'd use the word restoration instead of deterioration on these farms to try to restore this and make it better. So I would support this, and I think New Hampshire's had a long history of farmers having their farms open to the public, you know, dairy days and country days and all kinds of things. And I know right now they're pretty nervous about continuing with that kind of thing. So we are looking for a little bit of protection of farmers on this, but it's to be the benefit of the industry and getting people educated about animals. So I'll stop with that.
Thank you, John. Donna Lee Woods. Donna, did you leave us? Okay, doesn't want to speak. Oh, no, there you are. I'm sorry.
Can we pass these out?
You could give them to the gentleman, the red hair. Thank you. So Donna, I know you've been around the block once, twice. So just talk to us. It's the best way to get us. We listen. We will read your test. Try not to read it if you can.
Well, I really would prefer to.
Because we're going to read it anyways. But we have to be out of here at a time certain.
I'll read real fast, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Sure. I'll give you a shot.
All right, Hickory Nut Farm is a goat milk state inspected and registered dairy. We produce firm goat milk cheeses, milk, yogurt, and goat milk soaps. We were an open farm and highly encouraged people and two-legged kids to come and visit, to experience a livestock farm. A lady from Dover came to visit and I was not there. She saw the winter pack stalls and some older grandmas and sent me a scathing email. I responded and asked her to come for a tour. She did not respond and called the SPCA. A few days later, the SPCA showed up and asked to look around. I said, of course. They looked around and left. Then May 10th, the SPCA and many vehicles and the chief of police showed up. The chief served me with a search warrant, and if I didn't sign it, he would arrest me. I was in complete shock. I could not think. I was scared and shaking. I had no idea what my rights were. I have never felt that bullied before. I had no idea what to do. After much moving my ladies around, they took 2 kids. I asked why, and they said one had a thin neck. They told me I had to kill the 5 grandmas because they were old. They were very healthy. They gave me a list of things I had to do, and they would be back May 24th. On May 21st, the SPCA and a policeman showed up again with all the cars and trailers. They proceeded to manhandle my goats. We practiced winter pack, which is where we build up the hay in the 11 stalls to 2 feet in the spring. There is fresh hay spread over all the stalls every day. Also, they have fresh water daily in 2 large troughs, which we keep inside in one of the stalls so they do not freeze. Now, the winter pack provides warm bedding for the goats during the winter. We use our skid steer to clean them out once the temperature at night stays around 40 degrees. Our skid steer was being repaired, so one of our farmhands started to clean out a stall with a wheelbarrow. That is the stall the SPCA chose to trap the goats. One of our farmhands went down and told them not to use that stall, that there were 10 other stalls and they would not listen. They stayed there. The goats were screaming. They were scared. I still wake up in the night to hear their screaming. It was a 90-degree day, very strong ammonia smell. The policeman would not let me near them to comfort them, the goats. He kept pulling on my clothes, sprained my wrist,
He stayed 1 foot from me at all times. I was so scared, I kept asking for help. They ignored me. The SPCA was lugging our goats off to the trailer. They took 10 of our milkers. I asked them what they were going to do with the milk. They said they don't have anybody to milk. So they let the mothers suffer with impacted udders and develop mastitis. One of the milkers was being hauled up by her front legs. Another inspector picked up her hind legs, crushing her udder. I heard her say that this is 54 goats and she was tired, so they quit. They took our new Sarnen buck. He was perfect. I had just purchased him for our breeding. They turned around and offered him back to me for $400, and I had to give them full access to my farm to do whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. Please read the longer testimony in your packet for more examples of cruelty to our farm, our goats, and me. They took 54 goats, killed 22, and offered the rest of the goats back to me for $40,000. They recommended that 20 goats need help, but took 54. Questions?
Senator Abbas, that's one for you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. When this occurred at the farm you spoke of, was there a state veterinarian or one of their assignees present?
I don't know. The first time they came, there was one vet, and she spoke today. Very nice lady. And then the second time, there were 2 vets. State vets, I don't think so. I don't know who they are, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, very much. Your farm looks very nice. Thank you for your time. Appreciate your coming. Robert, I think it's Johnson, the second.
Mr. Chair, what I'm handing out is the existing RSA. For the record, Rob Johnson, representing New Hampshire Farm Bureau, is the Federation's policy director, and we do support the bill. There's 2 items in particular I would like to point out in the bill, and I'm going to use the existing law for part of it. You see page 3 of the existing statute. I highlighted it for you, Roman 4-A, subsection A. And it's been alluded to before, but what we're doing there, what the bill does, it strikes the highlighted language, or officer of a duly licensed humane society. And that's in a protective custody situation. And we strongly believe for animals to be taken, it should be a public official. Currently, the way that law reads, it provides the ability of a private business to designate private citizens to operate in the criminal code with no public oversight or accountability. The other section I would like to point out to you, and I've also highlighted that, the existing statute requires that when livestock are seized, that a veterinarian makes the probable cause determination. And if you look at the bill itself on page 1, Roman 4A1, there's language there that states, and this is in a arrest situation, that the state veterinarian or the designee. And what we see this is doing is currently it's a state veterinarian or a licensed veterinarian. This expands it. It's the state veterinarian, any licensed veterinarian that the state veterinarian designates, any of the state veterinarian's technicians, or anybody else that the state veterinarian believes is capable. We think that is an improvement and should help the situation all around, provided expertise in situations of livestock. And Mr. Chair, I'll end it there with one item. You received an email, and I want to make sure you receive it from former Commissioner of Agriculture, Lorraine Maryland Support, and I've got copies here so that you can take a look.
Thank you very much.
We all set?
Good. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate your testimony. Joan, are you still here, Wheeler? Representative Wheeler? Is there anyone else who wishes to testify? I've had, sure, come up now while I got you. Sorry if I missed you.
I wasn't sure that I was going to speak, but
Okay.
there were a couple of things that I thought I needed to add to the
Sure.
conversation.
Go
So
ahead.
for the record, Representative Peter Bixby, Ranking Member of House Environment and Agriculture, representing Dover, New Hampshire. I worked with now Senator Pearl when he was in the House to do a revision of these statutes in 2018. And at that point, we thought that we had really improved the due process. One thing we overlooked was that many of the rights that we established in that process only come into play when someone is charged, which means that there are a number of rights in statute that don't come into play if someone is not charged, and and in that case, if their animals are seized, they don't have those rights. So that is one of the reasons that we put into this current amendment of the statute the fact that someone needs to be charged in order to have their animal seized. That's one thing I wanted to point out. Another thing is that in some cases, someone is given the opportunity to sign away their animals, but they don't really realize that's what they are doing. And I believe that that's what happened in Ms. Lee's case. She didn't realize that the documents she was signing was in fact a surrender of her animals. The portion where it says that in order to, when you're signing a document, you need to have it explained to you clearly what that document is doing, that is critical, because once you have signed away your animals, you don't have the right to them. But someone should not be signing their animals away unwittingly. Another aspect about is in terms of the cost of care. Under current statute, and the default responsibility for cost of care falls on the municipality where the legal officer works. It is so essentially when an officer is bringing charges, authorizing the seizure of an animal, etc., that officer and his or her department is responsible for the money, and it is an act of charity when a humane society or other other organization boards those animals. And we brought the cost of care fund into existence because we wanted to make sure that the municipalities would be protected from those charges. The other thing I wanted to point out, I think Mr. Johnson covered this pretty well, but the removal from current statute of a officer of a licensed humane society, as Mr. Johnson and as the commissioner pointed out, we shouldn't have people who are not sworn officers of the state or a subdivision executing the criminal code. So I think that's an important thing to take out. And just one final note, there's a set of, most of the bill is dealing with clarifying the due process rights of animal owners and making sure that those due process rights will be correctly applied. There is also a study committee. We decided that study committee was necessary because looking at the code in its entirety, it's been amended so many times over the years that it is just a ramshackle mess, like a New England farmhouse that's been added onto for centuries. So we want to go through the whole thing and sort of clean up that mess. So those are the two main purposes of the bill, and I hope you will pass it with any minor modifications you feel.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Appreciate it. Lisa Dennison, did I give you a chance? Okay.
What's the name of the lady at this one?
Who was she? She was, I have her name somewhere.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. I'm not going to read my testimony because you'll have it before you, but there are a few things that I'd just like to clarify, if I may. First of all, humane agents and individuals from the New Hampshire SPCA or any humane society are not able to seize animals without a search warrant. We are not able to execute search warrants. The police department executes search warrants. We assist them in those cases. So just to be clear about that. When animals are seized, charges are not necessarily brought forth yet because the evidence is still being collected. Animals are being tested and examined, et cetera, et cetera. In the past 10 years, we've had 5,600 complaints involving over 14,000 animals. 90% of them were supported. It was either non-binding or sometimes it was safety net programs that helped, perhaps our hay bale program, spay-neutering the animals and returning them, things like that. Sometimes it was helping with direct food or care. When the animals are in protective custody for the 12 to 18 months during a court proceeding, because the case has continued and continued and continued and continued, we would love for it to be expedited. We do not want to hold animals at great length, but it happens. We are now only able to apply for cost of care through the police departments. It is limited to $20 for a dog or $40 for livestock, $5 for poultry, with a cap of $500 per animal. If you have an animal with an emergency situation and you're going to an emergency veterinarian over the weekend, I think you each probably know you cannot leave for under $500. The whole case is a cap of $5,000, which means if you have 39 animals, you're going to exceed that almost immediately in trying to do restorative work, veterinary care, et cetera.
Got to wrap it up now.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. I just want to say that although the towns are liable for the bill, they don't necessarily pay it. And what they've said to us is we don't want to do a case if it's going to cost us. So it's not necessarily charity, it's putting the animals first, and we do take on that burden. The rest I'll have to follow up at a later date. But we are licensed by the Department of Agriculture, just as a point of reference. Thank you very much for your time.
Give me one question.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. You just brought up in your testimony the cost of care, and we discussed that at great length earlier with the commissioner. Just to recap your testimony, did you say that $20 a day for a dog, $50 for livestock?
40.
40. And a
$5 for poultry.
Okay.
$500 for medical for an individual, $5,000 capped on a case.
5,000 capped on a case, or if there are multiple animals in a case, for all of the animals?
My understanding is 5,000 for that one case. So for example, for the Northwood case that lasted 577 days and the ultimate bill was $95,000, we're capped per for that case of 5,000. In that case, we ended up settling the charges. We never got to court. After 577 days, 18 months, we settled for $10,000 on a $95,000 bill. She'll be paying us $25 a month for 33 years. So, it's not as though we're doing this in a self-serving way. It is not, Anyway, thank you. I hope that answered your question.
One follow-up, the cost of care schedule that you just gave us with $5 for livestock and, poultry. When is that reviewed? Is that annually? When was the last time it was updated?
It just began a few years ago, probably 2 years ago it was instituted. So before that, there was no cost of care. And the 14-day status hearing, we have not had a case yet where a judge is willing to rule on a 14-day status hearing. So that has not been effective either. And when we've called, at times, we called the state vet for an expert in a particular case that we had in Rollinsford recently. And the only person they had who was an expert in that particular area had retired. So, we really are at the mercy of all the veterinarians, not necessarily the only designee. We really need to be able to find experts in every field. That happened to be 2,000 mice.
All right, the mice. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. 2 minutes is more than enough. I appreciate all the testimony you've heard already. I'm Kurt Ehrenberg. I'm the New Hampshire State Director for Humane World for Animals, formerly Humane Society of the United States. And I do have written testimony. We oppose this bill. It's a dangerous bill that debilitates animal cruelty investigations and enforcement in New Hampshire. It forces law enforcement to charge owners with animal cruelty without providing adequate time to properly evaluate the condition of the animals after they are taken into protective custody. It requires animals to be returned to their owners even in situations where owners are overwhelmed and do not have the capacity to care for their animals properly. It ends crucial partnerships. Nonprofits that receive cruelty complaints and immediately notify law enforcement would be prohibited from assisting with the rescue or recovery of neglected animals, leaving local and state police to remove animals without expert assistance and also leaving them with the costs. I just say the cost of care law in New Hampshire, the best thing you can say about it is it's in its infancy and people are trying to make it work. So I'll leave it at that. But to rely on that for reimbursing these wonderful organizations that have not had enough praise today, I would say, that provide this care, we need to think about how they operate and this partnership that they have with law enforcement. Humane agents in the state have been an integral part of these investigations without any nefarious motives that are hidden here. And I would also say to listen to the chief of the Hudson Police. Go back and listen to what he said. That's the best testimony you'll hear today, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Was Representative Wheeler right outside? No? Okay. Does anyone else wish to testify on this bill that I missed? Come on up, sir. You look like someone who's just.
I'll be very quick. Thank you for Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for hearing me out. I am Henry Ahern. I own a deer farm in Plymouth, New Hampshire, and I am also chairman of the Livestock Committee for Farm Bureau. I am very much in support of this bill, and the major reason is I have nightmares at night of somebody that has no knowledge of my animals driving by and say, oh, that one looks bad, I better report it. And they report it, and somebody shows up at my door and starts taking the deer. I will tell you, I don't care if you bring 300 people with you, you're not going to be able to capture all those deer without assistance and knowing how to handle them. That is my nightmare. This bill addresses some of it, that at least the person that comes to designate with the police officer that there is a problem that I have not taken care of is a veterinarian or a designee who understands the livestock that I have. And that's what this bill basically is about. Thank you very much, and I'll be really quick.
You were. Thank you, sir. You're all set? We're all set. Thank you, sir. Maria Fields? No Maria Fields. We just got that last one. Yeah, you want to check outside? I hate if someone waited 3 hours. I cut them off. Nope. Looking good. Thank you. Okay, seeing no one else, that'll end the hearing on HB 616. Okay, if everyone can be quiet. House Bill 88, we're going to start. Representative McGuire did hit the thing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Dan McGuire. I represent the town of Epsom. Before I get started, I want to make sure you're looking at the right bill because what was in back was as introduced, but the bill was amended by the House. So you should have as amended. Okay, good. And the main point of the amendment was it removed the fiscal note. So don't, if your fiscal note is as introduced, don't pay any attention to it. Oh, thank you very much. Okay. What this bill does, see, the fiscal note is still as introduced, so it's irrelevant. All right. What this bill does is it adds a estate planning tool to families' toolkits, and it helps them save on federal income tax. This bill is already law in Florida, Tennessee, South Dakota, and Alaska. And what those states have in common with New Hampshire is that they are all states that don't have an income tax. And so we can pass this bill and, like those states, not affect us, not affect the state's finances in any way. Because if, say, a state like Massachusetts passed this and helped people save on their federal income tax, it would affect themselves because they, it would cut the amount of income tax that they themselves would collect. What the bill does is allow husbands and wives to hold property as community property rather than as joint property, which is all we have now. So it gives them a choice. They could create this kind of trust and have community property. Community property has one big tax advantage over joint property, which occurs on the death of one of the spouses. Okay, so what happens currently in New Hampshire, let's suppose you own property jointly with your spouse. Let's say it's a stock. You bought it as a couple for $1,000. One of you dies, the other one inherits. It's now worth $2,000, and that the surviving spouse sells the property for $1,000 capital gain. Okay, the way the IRS treats that situation is that half of the property was owned by the deceased spouse, and half of the property was owned by the surviving spouse. So the deceased spouse property, now worth $1,000 when it was inherited, there's no gain. There's no capital gain, right? It was worth $1,000 on death. They sold it for $1,000, no gain. But the property owned by the surviving spouse was bought when it was $500, sold for $1,000, there's a $500 gain, okay? That's what happens today in New Hampshire. When property is community property, such as in one of these trusts, or maybe somebody, there are 9 states that automatically have community property, like California, Texas, and others. In that case, the marriage owns the property. So when one spouse dies, the marriage ends, the surviving spouse inherits the property at that time. And so they have what's called a step up in basis. So in my example, property was bought for $1,000, becomes worth $2,000. The surviving spouse has property, they get it at a value of $2,000. They sell it for $2,000. There's no gain at all, right? So this allows a family to hold property as community property, avoid paying capital gains tax. It's completely optional. They can do it if they want to. They don't have to. It's as far as I can tell, only a benefit. I did have to argue this in the House a little bit, but the argument to me was very specious. I mean, it really didn't make sense. I'm happy to answer questions.
I understand it all. I do. No, property's good. Do you have questions? I think we're good.
All right.
That was good, Chris. You did it nice and easy. Thank you, Representative McGuire. I don't see anyone else. Kate Horgan doesn't want to speak. Anyone else wish to speak who didn't sign in? Seeing none, I will end the hearing on HB 88. We're going to take a 3-minute break. I will. We're all here. Motion to go into executive session. Okay, I'm going to introduce all those in favor of going into executive session, say aye. Aye. Aye, okay. We're going to start with HB 59. I have a motion to re-refer.
Second.
Any discussion?
Nope, where's
So it was the one you're hitting, if someone hit a fireman
Yeah.
or a police officer, we're afraid that it's going to attract others. Just next year, I'm gonna hear from the police, I'm sorry, from a teacher or some other group, and they're already gonna be punished for doing the lower level
it's already-
offense,
right.
which is not specifying them out. We're not
I would
pulling them.
advocate that that's a bad idea to hitting
Yeah,
a teacher.
if we carved them up. Okay, so the motion is for re-refer. All in favor of the re-refer?
Aye.
Any
opposed?
any opposed? No, there were no opposed. Motion, yep, second. All in favor of the consent motion?
Aye.
Aye. I'll take that. Okay, body worn cameras. I'm sorry. Thank you, Pete. We're moving on. Do I need to hit in between each one? No. HB 146, my problems with this, and so I motion to ITL.
Second.
Thank you.
All in favor of I'm sorry, we'll talk. Flanagan brought this in, Representative Flanagan. So the only problem was he was telling us the story that someone had told him. So we didn't have any testimony that this has been a problem or needed in other places. It was only on a violation offense. So the guy supposedly on the last day, on the 30th day, went to see the tape, and it seems like an amazing amount of work according to law enforcement that it will be for them, costs, all for this one, and I'm only aware of this one incident that was reported by someone else. We had no other testimony in the bill. So I'd like to ITL it, but I'd listen to other ideas.
I agree. ITL.
Okay, all in favor of the ITL motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Move consent.
Second.
All in favor of the consent motion?
Aye.
Aye. Representative, you want to take it out?
Sure.
Awesome, thank you.
Uh,
Terrace, yes.
Thank you
One,
very much. Oh, I just
we're going on to 195 relative to the expectation of privacy.
I move ITL.
Second. Any discussion?
I apologize. The one we just did was 146, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
We are in 195. We have a re-refer motion, and if you had any discussion.
Motion right here.
ITL motion.
I'm sorry. I apologize, yeah, ITL motion. If you had any discussion or thoughts.
I agree.
What's that, you agree?
I agree,
Okay,
yep.
then we're moving on. All those in favor of the ITL motion?
Aye.
Opposed, none, and
Move consent.
So moved.
all in
Second.
favor of the consent motion?
Aye.
Aye. Senator Abbott, you want to take it up?
Sure.
Darrell is. We're gonna hold 196, we're gonna hold 218. 291, the fertilizer amendment, I'm motioning for an ITL.
Second.
Discussion?
Oh, why?
Senator Abbott, you want to talk about the penalties? I think that was
Yeah.
part of your reasoning.
It's the first time I ever seen any proposed bill or any law that would require the first offense be a written warning. So I felt that that was a bad precedent to start. It's also a new law that we just passed a short time ago, when I understand, and I think it was literally last term.
Then the representative who brought the bill also was very much under the impression if a company laid out 4 lawns in a row, they could every time stack them, even though you hadn't been convicted of anything, which was incorrect.
In order to have a subsequent offense, you must be found liable or convicted of the first offense.
Correct.
So the 4 lawn in a row example would not be how it's operating.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Senator Abbott, you object to there being a written warning? Or
So there could be remedial action and education?
My understanding
So,
is it would require a written warning for the
Right.
first offense.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how that, so your subsequent offense is technically after you get a written warning.
Mhm.
But I'm not sure how you're not really convicted of a written warning. It just has to happen in order, you basically have to do it a second time. But that's usually not, I've never seen that in any law, statute, proposed bill. The police have discretion. It's just like speeding. They don't have to give you a written warning, but it happens all the time where they give you a warning. And I think that's really a discretionary function that the police have, and
Really, you don't get tickets?
I don't get pulled over in the first place.
Doesn't break the laws.
Okay, all right, touche. So, just because, I mean, doesn't mean we can't do it. And
You would have to demonstrate in order to convict the person of the second offense that they received a written warning, which I'm not even sure if unless it's the same department, would even know about that written warning. But this is a precedent that I don't think we need to codify in statute. And to me, I'm not going to support it, so I
So
would happily support an ITL.
but just so I'm clear, the objection is to the written warning piece. Do you have objection to the violation? And the fine on the violation? Is there objection to that? Or is it, I understand, like, setting up a new precedent, it could be applied in other places. So are you objecting to being guilty of a violation with the fine?
I think the fine right now for our first offense is $1,000, if I understand correctly.
It is.
5,000.
5,000.
I thought it was only 1,000, maybe.
431.18, any person who violates this,
Right,
Well,
I think
Don't
this
let it-
law came into place when they overrode a veto last year, so it was really strongly supported by the legislature, which, by the way,
what section are we in?
so just keep that in mind. But it just came into play.
431.
Or E, this would be new, huh?
Yes.
So we only have Senator Abbas for 10 minutes. That's why I'm rolling things along as fast as we can.
Well, if we keep him longer, he might be speeding.
He won't
I want that to happen.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. I
It's not
think,
gonna happen.
first of all, this would be incredibly hard to enforce, what somebody has actually put on their lawn. I think there are penalties already in the statute. And lastly, I just lost my other point about this. No, okay, I'm good with those two.
Those are good points.
If you wanted to convict a person, just so you know, they would have to test the chemical in some laboratory, and a $250 fine, it's going to cost more to test it, by the way. So that's another.
Oh, my last thing I was going to say was, I appreciate the intent that we don't want people using their old bags of fertilizer. That's a educational effort, not a law enforcement effort. Thank you.
Okay, on the ITL motion, ready to go? All in favor of the ITL?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
Move consent.
thank you. Second, all in favor of the consent motion?
Aye.
Senator Abbas, you want to take that out?
Sure.
Because you like to get in the weeds. Oh, somebody's listening in the peanut gallery. Ooh. Let's see, HP 301, I make a motion for ITL. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
So we got something today. Did you see that?
I
Greenhouse.
truthfully have not seen anything today.
Greenhouse.
It was on, yeah, it's on your.
I'm sure I caught it, but I
Can we
did
do
not
this
read
one
it.
another day?
Sure,
Thanks.
Motion withdrawn.
thank you. Okay, we withdrew the motion. We're gonna move on. We're not doing 369 today. We are going to do 380, and I have an ITL motion
Second.
relative to the penalties for criminal violations of therapeutic
Why
cannabis
did I
use.
think this was a real?
Yeah, I thought.
Oh, so we had, the caregiver selling cannabis to people without the cards.
Yep. And then losing their card. That's a pretty big penalty, right?
I don't think so, but
Losing your medical card?
If
Well,
you've been
I mean-
entrusted with a therapeutic cannabis card and then you start illegally selling the drug that you've been entrusted to, I mean, a pharmacist, like, I don't know what the penalties are. They would probably lose their license too if they were selling that stuff. But I don't believe it, I don't think there's anyone that's actually been charged with this since it's been the law, which is two things. One, the enforceability of it's very difficult, or two, the harsh penalties serving as a deterrent. So I don't see a reason to change the law.
Well, as the Therapeutic Cannabis Medical Oversight Board testified that, you know, people who have medical cannabis cards shouldn't be treated any differently than somebody else who unlawfully sells cannabis.
But they're allowed to possess one. That's the difference. Without the therapeutic card, it's decriminalized 3/4 of an ounce. The therapeutic card holder can possess up to 2 ounces. So they're able to possess a lot more. And then they're allowed to, and this is just how the law is, they're allowed to then exchange it amongst themselves. Like if you have a therapeutic card, I can give it to you. So they actually can move this stuff around much more easily than someone who doesn't have that card. And they sign a document acknowledging and agreeing to this penalty when they get the card. But now it's not fair. That's is the argument here. They agree, they literally have to sign something acknowledging that they understand what the penalty is when they do it. So they know they'll face a much harsher penalty if found to violate the law. But
So that's civil, not criminal. They're gonna lose their card because it's a contract they've entered into
I think that's part of the penalty, that if they're convicted, they lose the card.
in the agreement that they signed.
No, they're just signing like an acknowledgement that they understand the consequences if they actually violate the law. Basically, being informed, kind of like, we just saw that with the farming bill. They at least notify you, inform you.
So under the existing statute, where if you were selling marijuana today, you could be charged, can a person selling their medical marijuana be charged under that statute?
I don't believe there's a distinction whether it's therapeutic cannabis or something they bought off the street corner. The problem is you can't tell what it is when you have it.
Right.
We just assume that every patient or cardholder is doing the right thing and not doing that. But they're allowed to possess a higher amount. They're entrusted with possessing a higher amount.
So if they sold an ounce, do they get any different penalty than the person who does not have a medical marijuana card gets when they sell an ounce?
I believe they do so. I think that's what this was trying to make it so that it's the same penalty.
And are they exempted under the current law?
No, they have, if you have a therapeutic card, you're in more trouble.
Because you're gonna lose your card and get the penalty under the law.
It's still a harsher penalty from what I understand.
Really? Because we have further trust that they're allowed to have it and not misusing it.
I think this was passed in 2013 or 14, was before my time, so I wasn't there for all the debates, but I think part of it is you aren't trusting them with that. Just how I look at it, you aren't trusting them with something that.
Like the pharmacist, you're interested.
Yeah, so.
Okay,
What was the recommendation?
ITM.
No, and I haven't heard of anyone being prosecuted for violating the existing law, which is a good thing.
So this bill removes them, they've diverted their cannabis, now they will lose their card, and they used to be, it used to be punishable by a Class B felony. So that's what existing law is right now. And we would change that to whatever the penalty is in 318B.
You would be. We wouldn't be.
You would. Understood.
Okay, we can bet it on the floor if we want to. So we have a motion by ITL. All in favor of the ITL motion? None. I'm sorry, if you're following your home program.
Okay.
Yep.
ITL.
Yep. So all in favor of the ITL? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Is that one or two nays?
Anybody know what the penalty is under 318B?
Class B felony up to 7 years, up to 300.
It's a very light penalty.
That's a light penalty? Jeez.
They haven't made me a judge yet. Maybe that's why.
Roman 9. Which one? 22nd.
So not 318B 26. I'm going to vote no because I
Okay.
don't.
That's fine.
I don't have that.
No, it's 3-2, correct? Yep, so it's, Senator Abbas will take it out. Okay, let's see, 2-2, we're skipping 381. We're going to I'm sorry, on HB 468, establishing the crime penalties for unlawful use of unmanned aircraft. I have an ought to pass motion.
Second.
And I have a second. Discussion. We don't need the amendment, we were told by the author of the bill. So it's the
So we
drones.
don't need the amendment.
We
to
don't
be
need the
in-
amendment.
To be in concert with Senator Purcell's bill of awareness.
I believe that is correct.
The state police who've been working with Space Force and the other entities sent some information around that says that the federal government has preempted anything that happens over federal installations, and by doing what Senator Birdsell's amendment proposed to do, we might be jeopardizing cooperation between all those agencies and overstepping our bounds as a state government. So they said that the one that the House sent over that's in front of you now is the better thing to pass.
So not the 10-mile radius bill.
That's a different
Different bill.
Different bill. Okay.
Point out for the record that amendment
Okay.
was done with the assistance of Space Force.
Yeah.
Only for them to object to it later.
Okay.
But
Okay,
not
so
taking
all
the
in favor of the ought to pass motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 222, motion for consent?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor of the consent motion?
Second.
Second. Thank you. All in favor of the consent motion?
Aye.
Senator Absolute, you want to take that out?
Sure.
What?
You said Abbott. I thought you said Abbott.
Can we have one more? Absolute.
Okay.
Okay. Can we do one more? Sure, it'll be really quick. 482, ought to pass motion? Well, we're in this one now. On 580, he'll let me have two. 482, ought to pass, second, Senator Abbas. It's the 100-mile-an-hour drunk driving one, if you recall.
I don't even think you have to be drunk. You can just be.
I'm sorry, you're correct. I believe you could just be going over the 100.
To be reckless. Either flow.
All in favor of the ought to pass motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion for consent. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor of the consent motion? Aye. Okay, I'll take it out. Okay, can we do one more?
Only if Kate gets to call it.
She'll pick a hard one. How about 17 on your little list? 776, Kate, is that good? Five, 5-1, I'll go with you then. It's repealing license to sell pistols and revolvers. I'll make an ought to pass motion. Do I have a second? Senator Abbas?
Second.
Second. Discussion. Oh, wait, go ahead.
Your motion, pal.
Okay, so we didn't, it's every 5 years, I believe, now you have to reapply, so you go in once, you pay your $10. It's not really a necessary bill anymore, or law, so we were just gonna clean it up and get rid of it. You can say something more to that?
Not bad, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I mean, the prime sponsor didn't bother to show up for this bill, first of all, so really,
That is a tough start.
yeah. The prime sponsor wasn't
We're
that
doing
interested.
551 now.
And we've received no communication since the hearing. And this is like
I just, I think it's a terrible idea.
Okay.
I will also note the complaint was, it took this person, it's gonna save him $10.
$10.
And it took him an hour to get his signature notarized, was the other complaint. And he had to pay for a certified mail to the National PD.
Okay, all in favor of the author pass motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
I'll take it out. You gonna go? He's gotta go. Okay. So that's all we're doing today. Thank you all. Thanks for nice.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn, what?
To come out of executive.
Okay, you go. We'll keep going. What do you think we can do? You're going, go. You're gone. Thank you for your service, Senator Abbas. It is duly appreciated.
Really, we won't do anything.
You're gonna get,
Go ahead.
Sharon used to give me gold stars my first year, 10 years ago.
Take one away.
This was.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Kate, what did you have?
This is 301.
What's the quickest?
Thank you.
No,
301.
Is it 5 zeros or 3-2?
3-2.
We killed 522.
Are we out of the executive?
No.
No, I didn't. I just sort of,
Say it again,
Dribbled on.
522.
probably me. 697. Okay. Sure. Why don't we talk about each of them? So 697, the witness fees. Here's how I remember it. You can straighten me out if I'm wrong. I'm sure you will. The sponsor, really, she admitted that when she filed the bill, it has both the gas mileage and a daily payment. Then she said, oh, that isn't really what I wanted. All I really want is the mileage. So, and she said, you guys can just correct that. I believe that's what she said in her testimony. So she has in this bill right now paying for appearance fees. I don't mind giving them the gas, but why don't we just re-refer it and work it out later, unless this is important to you guys.
Are you?
So we're on
776?
697.
Oh, 697.
Oh, okay.
I'm like, I'm looking at the aggravated driving. I'm like, what are you
My
talking about?
understanding is you show up for court, a witness
Yep.
shows up for court.
Yes, and the person doesn't come.
And the person doesn't come or it gets continued or something like that. The witness is obligated to come back again, maybe
Yes.
several times, but never gets an additional witness fee. The first one was it, no matter how many times you come back.
So her purpose, though, in filing this bill
Yeah.
was only for gas mileage, she said. She never really wanted to, they just wrote it up this way. She goes, I wasn't really after this. So if she's not after it, I'm not looking to add costs to the state that the author of the bill didn't even intend to do. I do understand what, somebody when they were writing up the bill, added that part.
Yep. That was Senator Altschuler's idea, actually. It sounds
Oh,
like
I'm sorry.
to get additional witness fees for each.
Did she go to trial a lot? Is that?
No, she wasn't a sponsor though, so we'll
Okay.
disregard that. Okay, ITL's fine with me.
Well, we were just gonna re-refer it, but I could
Okay,
idea that.
let's re-refer it then.
No, we're gonna re-refer. Okay.
Okay. Was
Um,
there a motion or no?
So did I have a second? Yes, Ruth seconding my re-refer. All in favor of the motion to re-refer? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Tara?
Yeah.
Aye, okay. I'm just old and deaf. I don't know. Great. Okay, we're going on to the last one. I'm sorry, yes, motion for consent. Thank you, Pete.
So moved.
You have 4-0 for re-refer and consent.
Yes. And, I'm sorry, on the consent motion, did we have a second?
Moved
You have a
and
second. On the consent motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. One of you guys want to take it out? Tara, want to take it out? Sure. Thanks. Okay. Just, what a committee. We just work so well together. HB 776, relative to the crime of aggravated driving while intoxicated. I make an ought to pass motion. Senator is seconding me. Discussion, or are we all set? 776. What's that? Okay.
Great.
Okay. All in favor of the ought to pass motion?
No,
Aye.
Aye.
I, oh, I'm
Okay.
anti-sponsor not showing up.
Motion for consent.
So moved.
Thank you. And seconded.
It's,
somewhere.
yes.
Okay. All in favor of the consent motion?
Aye.
And I'll take it out. Anything else?
Nope. Move to come out of exec session?
Yes,
Yep.
since you have your folder now, Pete, can I have that?
So we're coming out of the exec or we're standing?
If you give me 1 second,
Oh,
I
sure.
just want to give you, there is a, we're holding on 218, but we,
Yes, we
the
are
last
holding
time
on
we- yeah,
196 and 218, yep.
the last time we brought up two, the last time we brought up 218 was because we held, because we were waiting for an amendment. This is the amendment from the stakeholders who said, can you hold? So I'm fine to like put it in your, I just want you to have it
Okay, I got it. Okay.
so that we can make it, maybe make it a committee amendment afterwards.
So you're fine doing it now? I'll wait.
Yeah, please, please.
Okay, we'll wait on that one, but thank you for giving it to me. Appreciate it.
You could do it now.
Want to do it now?
Sure.
You can make it a committee.
Uh,
I have
sure.
no pride of honor.
Sure.
Authorship, So
I'd like to get another folder out, so, okay. I'll let you make the motion.
move on to pass.
On the bill.
Oh, I'm
and
sorry.
then we'll do the amendment
Yeah.
after.
Move
And
on
I'll
to pass.
second your,
Thank you.
on to pass.
Um,
We don't need to discuss.
Chair, I'd like to introduce Amendment 1665S for adopt as a committee amendment for House Bill 218.
Okay.
So initial contact between the victim and law enforcement agency responsible for investigating a crime, the agency shall inform the victim, promptly ensure the victim about resources, financial assistance, and social services, and the right of a victim to request a copy of the law enforcement report and other documents related to their case, including the right to receive a free copy of the initial incident report. The release of any documents associated with the investigation shall be at the discretion of law enforcement agencies based on the status of the case. So there was discussion about there being two, if a case was yay thick, that was an increased burden but this is just the initial copy, the initial incident report.
So I'm fine with it, and I'll go along with it. I did have misgivings about it. In case there were redactions needed, phone numbers needed to come out, names of minors, confidential informants.
It's just the victim though. This is not for anybody. The victim gets their.
And they get to
for
see.
their own case. Yes,
No, I'll just let it go for now.
okay.
That's okay. On another day I would have, but we'll let it go.
Okay.
So, okay.
Move,
So motion on
move
the
it.
ought to pass. All
well,
in
we gotta
favor?
adopt the amendment.
Oh, I'm sorry, we got an amendment. I'm
Yeah.
sure.
I'll second the amendment.
Okay, all in favor of the amendment?
I
Aye.
Move on
Okay.
to pass as amended.
second.
Okay, all in favor of the ought to pass as amendment motion?
Aye.
Aye, all four ayes.
Move
I'll take
consent.
Yeah, you'll take it up.
Yep.
And
Move
motion for
consent?
consent, yep, second.
Second.
All in favor of the consent motion?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. $10.
Want to do another one?
Up. I don't think so. No, I think we're good. Are we good? That's about all we want to vote. Any what?
18.
Certainly
we-
don't
we
want to
already-
do 616
We already
today.
did 240, right?
We did one, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, we did 2
Yes. You were
Oh,
really
that
good.
was earlier in the day. Yes, thank you. And it was
Um,
on correct?
OTA? Yeah. Zero.
What about the 88?
I want to look at a couple of things.
Okay. Because I had things I thought were wrong, but then I thought I did,
Need
yeah.
more info.
Okay, so that leaves us one. Oh yeah, Turcotte's bill
can I
on
ask you a question?
670 on the dogs.
Yeah, can I ask you a question about 240? Was it able to go on consent or did?
Yeah,
It's on consent? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
3-0.
Got it.
Yep.
Thank you.
We can just talk for a second. 670 with the dogs biting and nuisancing. Today sort of went to the dogs, not the goats. Okay, yes, bad jokes.
Bad joke. There was a suggestion of some language at the last section from the trial lawyers about not limiting that Mercer Chase agreed to send us. Can we hang
Okay.
on and just see what? that
Pete
is?
has that language. I don't know if it'd be ready to have a committee amendment, would you? So,
Yep.
okay, so I'm offering that as a committee amendment, correct?
Second.
I'd like to, oh, so I have to, what?
Oh.
Yeah, okay, so walk me through it and we'll do it. Yep, so I have not to pass motion on 670. Yep. And I'm moving the committee amendment. And I have a second or two. And all in favor of the committee amendment?
Aye.
Aye. All four. And, yeah, up to pass as amended, all in favor?
Aye.
What? Oh, second, first.
Second.
Okay, either way, whoever. And,
Just make it up, Peter.
Move consent.
thank you, second.
Second.
All in favor of the consent motion?
Aye.
Aye. Senator Reardon.
He's delighted.
Okay, very good. Motion to come out of exec, are we all set?
Second.
Yes. So moved.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Great. It was a long day. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.